The signature at the bottom of the message was hers. She had never written it. Renee Whitaker Hahn, 35, a black woman who built the locked systems that kept a Korean crime family safe, stood in a council room and watched her own seal accuse her. A 4 million transfer in her name. A private rose code stamped on the lie. She asked for 48 hours. The man across the table refused. That man is Seo Tae-hyun, 37. They call him the Still Water. A black koi tattoo runs down the left side of his neck, disappearing under his collar. He rules from a carbon fiber wheelchair, huge hands folded on dark wood, and he says nothing while 11 people decide her fate. He was her husband. He froze her access. He sent her away. 2 years pass. A blizzard swallows the city. He sees a woman selling red roses outside his own skyscraper. Deep wine dress, black coat. It is her. An executive walks out with 7 red roses and 1 white. The exact code tied to the date that destroyed their marriage. Renee steps close. Her wedding ring still hides on a chain against her chest. She tells him the real traitor is already inside his building, carrying her roses through his halls. He never froze the marriage. She never signed her name, and the flowers in her hands are counting something no phone could ever carry. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Renee counted the chairs before she counted the faces, 12 at the long table, and every one of them turned to watch her walk in. She had walked into this room 100 times. Tonight the door felt heavier. She took her seat at Taehyun's right hand, the way she always had. His wheelchair was already pushed close to the table's edge, his huge hands folded on the dark wood. He looked at her once. She read nothing in it. That was the first warning, and she missed it. Songjin stood at the far end with a tablet in his hand. He wore gunmetal gray that night, cufflinks catching the low light, his reading glasses low on his nose. He did not sit. Men who intend to speak first rarely sit. She had never trusted him. She had also never been able to name why, and in this family you did not accuse a man of a feeling. He had been Taehyun's father's lawyer before he was Taehyun's, and he wore that history like a second suit. When she'd married in, he had kissed her hand and called her a gift to the house. She had smiled and filed the word away. Gifts get returned. Before the council begins, he said, there is a matter of trust. Renee's fingers found the edge of the table. She kept her face still. Across from her, an old man named Ha cleared his throat and looked at the ceiling. 2 seats down, the woman she had trained studied a water glass. The room had the temperature of a decision already made, and she was the last to feel it. 3 days ago, Songjin went on, the Kang negotiation collapsed. We lost the position. Someone inside this family told them where our floor was. A murmur moved down the table. Renee felt 11 pairs of eyes slide toward her and slide away, the way people look at something they have already decided about. That's a serious accusation, she said. Say the name. I will show it instead. He tapped the tablet. The screen behind him woke. Messages. Her name at the top of the thread, her signature block at the bottom, the small digital seal she used on every internal document, the one only she carried the key for. Numbers ran down the side. A transfer, 4 million, routed through an account she had never opened, time-stamped the night before Kang walked away. She read it twice. She made herself read it a 3rd time, slower, because the room was waiting for her to break, and she would not give them that. The signature block was perfect. That was the thing that frightened her most, in the small, cold place under the anger. Not a forgery a child could spot. Every character of her seal sat exactly where it should. Whoever had built this had not guessed at her key. They had held it. They had studied the way she signed, the way a forger studies a hand, until the copy is truer than the original. "That's not mine," she said. "Your key signed it." "Then my key was taken." "Taken?" Songjin repeated the word as if tasting it. "By whom?" "You keep it on a device that never leaves you. You told this council that yourself, the winter you rebuilt our security. You stood where I'm standing, and you said, 'A key a person can lose is a door a person can walk through.'" He spread his hands. "I'm only quoting you." She had said it. She had believed it. She had built the whole locked house he was now using to bury her. Songjin's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "Everyone at this table protects their key with their life. You've said so yourself." He turned to the others. "She trained half of you on exactly that." That landed. She saw it land. A woman 2 seats down looked at her lap. Renee turned to Taehyun. This was the moment, 2 years of marriage, of him reaching for her hand under tables exactly like this one, of a wedding ring she still wore hidden on a chain against her chest, because his world did not let wives be seen. She waited for him to speak. She had earned that much. She was certain she had earned that much. He said nothing. "There's more," Songjin said, and the screen changed again. Roses. A photograph of a delivery log. A florist's order, 7 red and 1 white, timed to a date. Beside it, a second image, the same sequence, the same date, sitting in the metadata of the forged transfer like a signature written twice. "The rose code," Songjin said, letting the word sit. "The private one. The one this house uses when it wants to say something no phone can carry. Whoever built this fraud knew that code. There are, what, 6 people alive who know it?" He looked around, counting for them. She is one. Renee's throat closed, because that part was true. The rose code was hers and Taehyun's before it was anyone's. It had started as a private thing between a husband and a wife who could not be seen holding hands in public. A flower left on a desk, a color that meant "come home," a number that meant "I'm safe." She had taught it to Lorraine's shop with her own hands, one careful afternoon among the buckets. She had grown it into something the family used when phones could not be trusted, and now it lay on the table beside a lie, wearing her fingerprints, and every use she had ever made of it had become a rope for her own neck. She looked down the table again. Ha would not meet her eyes. None of them would. They had spent years watching her stand at Taehyun's shoulder and translate his silences, and not one of them stood now. "Taehyun," she said. His name, only his name. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the screen. "Give me 48 hours, she said. Her voice stayed level. She was proud of that, later, when there was nothing else to be proud of. 48 hours, and I bring you the person who built this. Freeze the accounts if you have to. Watch me the whole time, but give me 2 days. The room went quiet enough to hear the building breathe. Taehyun's hands came apart on the table. He set them flat. When he spoke, his voice was the thing the city called him for, the reason they called him still water. No rise, no crack, level as a frozen lake. No, one word. She felt it go through her like cold going through a wall. Freeze her access, he said. Not to her, to the room, all of it, tonight. Taehyun, you are not to enter any property of this family. He was still not looking at her. Looking at him, not looking at her, was worse than any shout. You will leave the city. You will not contact the council. Songjin will handle the accounts. Songjin was already moving, already tapping, already killing her keys one by one. She heard her phone buzz in her bag as her own systems locked her out. Then it buzzed again. Then it went dark. 6 years of access. She had held doors in this house that Taehyun's own blood relatives had never been trusted with. He closed them all in the time it took her to stand up. The car will take her to the airport. Songjin said, to Park Dae-sung, who had stepped in from the wall without a sound. Dae-sung wore his usual graphite and his usual gloves, and his eyes moved over her once, flat, professional, cataloging an object to be moved. One bag, no devices, nothing that belongs to the family. I know what belongs to me, Renee said. She stood up, 12 faces. She looked at each of them, slow, so they would remember they had looked away. Someone in this room did this, she said. You're going to help me get to my feet, and you're going to hand him the knife again. She turned to her husband. Even you. That reached him. She saw the muscle move in his jaw, the one tell he had. For half a second, she thought he would reach for her hand the way he always had. He put both hands back on the wheels of his chair instead. She walked out of the room she had walked into 100 times. This time, no one rose to see her go. She held it together in the elevator. She held it together in the elevator, past the guards who had called her ma'am that morning, and now watched her leave like a stranger, their eyes following her to the revolving door and no farther. She got as far as the street, and the cold hit her, and something in her chest tried to fold, and she pressed a gloved hand hard against her sternum until it stopped. Dae-sung stood by the open car door, waiting, patient as a wall. I'm not getting in that car, she told him. Those weren't the instructions. The instructions were that I leave. I'm leaving. She looked past him at the tower, all the way up to the floor, where a room full of people were already moving on to the next item on the agenda. You can tell him I found my own way out. He'll understand. He always understood that part of me better than the rest. Dae-sung considered her. For a moment she thought he would reach for her arm. Then he stepped back and let the door hang open on an empty seat, and something like respect, or maybe only calculation, passed over his face. She walked, not toward the airport, away from all of it, into a city that did not know her name, and she let it swallow her, the way she had planned to let it swallow her, from the second word out of her husband's mouth. She only had one thing left that was hers, the ring on the chain. She pressed her hand flat over it through her coat and kept walking into the dark, and she did not go to any airport, and by morning there was no Renee Whitaker Hahn for anyone in that tower to find. She had asked for 48 hours to prove she was innocent. He had given her none. So she would take 2 years, and she would take them on her own terms, and when she came back she would not be asking. 2 winters later, she pressed her hand over the same spot to keep the wind from stealing the roses. The blizzard had come down over the financial district, like a held breath let go. Snow moved sideways. It stacked on the shoulders of men who ran from car to lobby, on the awnings, on the bucket at her feet, where 60 stems stood wrapped against the cold. Renee stood on the corner she had claimed at 6 that morning, a wine scarf wound to her chin, dark gloves on her hands, and she sold roses to people who would not meet her eyes. She had learned to like the not meeting. When people don't look at you, they don't wonder where they've seen you. Red? She asked a man in a camel coat. He shook his head and hurried on. Her hands ached. She'd stopped feeling 3 of her fingers around 8 o'clock and made peace with it. Lorraine had begged her to take the morning off, had stood in the shop doorway in her green apron and her rose-shaped brooch, and said, "No one buys flowers in a blizzard, child, come in and drink something hot." But rent was rent. Even the soft, undercharged rent Lorraine pretended not to keep track of. And Renee had learned 2 years ago that the only thing that kept the folding-in feeling away was work with her hands. So she'd kissed the older woman's cheek and carried the bucket out into the white. Lorraine Brooks had found her on a night much colder than this one, curled in the doorway of the shop with a chain around her neck and nothing else, and had not asked a single question that mattered. She'd made tea. She'd given her a room. Over 2 years she had asked exactly once who Renee had been before, and when Renee said someone who trusted the wrong man, Lorraine had nodded like that explained the whole of human history and never asked again. She was the closest thing to family Renee had left, and Renee had never told her the man's name, because names in that family were a kind of weather that followed you. 2 years had taught her the weight of a day like this. 12 roses meant lunch. 20 meant she made rent to Lorraine on time and kept the small room above the flower shop that Lorraine refused to charge her properly for. She had built a life the size of a bucket. It was hers, and no one could freeze it, and some mornings that was enough. Some mornings. She glanced up at the skyscraper across the street, the way she never let herself glance. One flick of the eyes, no longer. 40 floors of black glass with the CO group name somewhere near the top where the storm ate the letters. She looked away before she could feel anything. She had gotten good at that too. A dark car pulled to the curb across the street. She noticed it because the driver got out and went to the trunk and came back with something folded and matte black, and she knew the shape of it before her mind said the word. A wheelchair. Her body knew first. Her hand closed around a stem hard enough that the wrapping crushed. The rear door opened. He came out of the car the way he did everything, without hurry, transferring his weight in one controlled motion, all shoulders and forearms in a coat cut wide to hold them. Snow landed on his hair and he ignored it. Even seated, even at a distance, even through a blizzard, there was no mistaking the size of him. The city had a name for that stillness, and she had lived inside it for 2 years. Seo Tae-hyun rolled toward the tower he owned, and did not once look across the street. She had heard, in the way you hear things about a life you used to live, that he had stopped going out, that after she vanished, he had pulled deeper into the black glass and closed the top floors like a fist. She had not let herself wonder if the two things were connected. Wondering was a door, and behind that door was a woman who still wore a ring on a chain, and Renee kept that door shut with both hands. Renee turned her back to him. She faced her bucket. She told her hands to keep working, and they refused, so she gripped the handle of the bucket instead and stared at the snow collecting on the roses and breathed. He did not see me, she told herself. He never sees anything below the height of his own eyes anymore. But the day was not finished with her. A second man crossed the street toward her. He came from the same tower, wrapped in a camel wool overcoat with a black scarf, a shaved head under a dusting of white, a short gray beard. He walked like a man who had checked twice that no one followed. She had learned to read that walk. She'd worn it herself. "You're the florist," he said, not a question. His breath smoked. "I sell roses," Renee said. "That's most of being a florist." He almost smiled. He didn't quite make it. "I need a specific order. I have red and I have white." 7 red. He paused. His eyes moved once to the tower and back, and 1 white. The world narrowed to the space between them. She kept her face empty out of 2 years of practice, but her heart went sideways in her chest. 7 red and 1 white. No one asked for that by accident. No one alive stumbled into that number in that order. It was not a bouquet. It was a sentence, in a language 6 people knew, and this stranger had just spoken it to her on a frozen corner, as though ordering coffee. "That's an unusual arrangement," she said carefully. "I was told it would mean something to the right person." Told by whom? He didn't answer that right away. A gust came off the avenue and bent the roses in the bucket, and neither of them moved to shield them. Snow filled the gap where his answer should have been. "You know it means something," he said instead. "I watched your face when I said the numbers. You went still, the way people go still, when a name they know gets read out in a crowd. I sell flowers on a corner. Everything means something to somebody." 7 red and 1 white, Malcolm said again, slower, testing the words on her like a key in a lock. "It doesn't mean a wedding. It doesn't mean a funeral. I've had 2 weeks to learn. There's exactly one place that arrangement means anything, and it isn't a florist's window. It's a boardroom 40 floors up. His eyes held hers. And you didn't blink. He reached into his coat and brought out cash, more than the flowers were worth, and held it without offering it yet. A man buying the right to be understood, not the flowers. Renee looked at him properly now. The overcoat was expensive and 2 seasons old. His hands shook, and not from the cold. This was a man who had decided to do something that could kill him, and had not yet found out whether it would. "What's your name?" she asked. "Malcolm," he said. "Graves. I ran. A floor of the building behind me. Finance." His jaw worked. "I found something in the numbers I wasn't supposed to find, and I've spent 2 weeks learning that there is no safe way to say it out loud. Every channel in that building is watched. Every email, every call. Every meeting is minuted by people who work for the man I need to accuse." He looked at the roses. "Then, someone left me a note. Handwritten. It said if I ever needed to move something no wire could carry, I should buy 7 red roses and 1 white from the woman on this corner, and say it out loud." Renee's gloved hand rose to her chest without her deciding it, flat over the chain, over the ring. "Who left you the note?" she asked. Her voice had changed. She heard it change and could not stop it. It wasn't signed. Malcolm's eyes searched her face. But whoever it was knew things they shouldn't. About me. About the account. About the date. "What date?" he told her. The number went into her like the cold had gone into her on a night 2 years old. Through the coat, through the skin, straight to the ring against her chest. It was the date. The one on the forged transfer. The one on the delivery log. The one that had emptied a room of 12 people of any reason to look at her. 2 years old, and it lived in her body like a scar you can find in the dark. She took the money. She counted out 7 red stems and 1 white, with hands that had gone very steady, the way they always went steady. At the exact moment everything inside her did not. She stripped the lower thorns with her thumbnail, the way Lorraine had taught her. She wrapped the stems. She tied the wine ribbon in the double knot she used for every order, and for 1 heartbeat, her fingers remembered tying that same knot in a kitchen years ago, a flower left where a husband would find it, a color that meant come home. She held the bouquet a beat longer than she needed to, and looked at it, and understood that she had just built the same 8-flower sentence that had been used to destroy her, except this time it was true, and it was hers to send. The number that had ended her marriage. The number that had emptied a room of anyone willing to look at her. She had spent 2 years learning to hate the sight of it, and here it was again in her own 2 hands, and this time, the lie was cut the other way. "What did you find in the numbers?" she asked. "The thing you weren't supposed to find." Malcolm's jaw worked. He looked up the street, down the street, at the tower. "Money that moves in a circle," he said quietly. "It leaves the company through one door and comes back through another, wearing a different name. And every time it comes home, it's smaller, and the difference lands somewhere I'm not allowed to see. I built the model that was supposed to catch exactly that. 2 weeks ago it caught something, and I've been pretending it didn't since." His hands were shaking harder now. "There's a subsidiary that shouldn't exist. It has no employees, and it holds things it has no business holding. And the only signature on its founding papers belongs to a man everyone in that building calls loyal." "You have a name," Renee said, not a question either. She was learning his trick. "I'm not saying it on a street corner." "Good," she said. "Neither would I." "Give me the note," she said then. "The handwritten one. Do you still have it?" Malcolm hesitated. Why does a florist want an unsigned note? Renee looked at him over the roses, and for the first time in 2 years, she let something show in her face, and it was not fear. Because I know the handwriting, she said, and I know who's been watched, and I know that the man you're afraid of is standing on the top floor of that building right now, wearing his own innocence like a coat. She held the bouquet out to him. You think the traitor is inside those walls? I know he is. He is. She let the flowers pass from her gloves to his. He's carrying my roses. Malcolm stared at her. Snow gathered in the seconds neither of them filled. Who are you? He said. Across the street, 40 floors up in the black glass, the storm swallowed the last letters of a name she had once shared. She watched Malcolm's fingers close around 8 stems that meant more than he knew, and she felt the ground she had stood on for 2 frozen years quietly break apart beneath her boots. Come back tomorrow, Renee said. Same corner. Bring the note. Tell no one which florist you spoke to. They watch me, Malcolm said. I told you. Every door in that building. Then buy flowers. She nodded at the bucket. Men buy flowers. It's the one thing no one ever asks a man to explain. She pressed a single loose red stem into his lapel above the bouquet, so that from any window he was only a man who had bought too many roses in a storm. Walk slow, look cold, don't look back at me. And then? She wound the scarf tighter to her chin and turned back toward the tower she had trained herself never to look at, and let herself look at it, all the way to the top. And then we send the roses inside, she said, and we wait to see who flinches. Malcolm did not come back the next morning. He came back that same afternoon, and he came back running. Renee saw him from half a block off, cutting across the plaza with his coat open, the camel wool flapping, one hand pressed flat to his chest where the inside pocket was. She had time to set the bucket down. She had time to slide the loose stem from a passing man's line of sight. Then Malcolm was in front of her, breathing like a man who had climbed stairs he had no business climbing. They took the bouquet up, he said. I did what you said. Left it at the front desk. Told them it was for the 29th floor. And someone came down for it. He swallowed. Not a courier, a lawyer. She kept her face still, gray at the temples, glasses. Malcolm's mouth opened. You know him. Everyone in that building knows him. She picked the bucket back up, because a woman who sold roses did not stand empty-handed when the wind was this hard. What did he do with it? He looked at the white one for a long time. Then he asked the desk who'd sent it. Malcolm's voice dropped. The desk said a florist on the corner. He asked which corner. The cold went straight through her gloves then, and it had nothing to do with the weather. You have to move, Malcolm said. Tonight. He's going to send someone. He already has. She nodded once toward the tower doors, where a man in a graphite suit had stepped out under the awning and was standing very still, hands folded, watching the plaza the way a hawk watches a field. Park Dai sung. 2 years, and he had not changed the way he held his shoulders. That one. Malcolm followed her eyes and went rigid. Don't stare, she said. Buy a rose. He fumbled a bill out of his pocket. She wrapped a single stem, took her time with the paper, and while she did it, she spoke without moving her lips more than she had to. Listen to me. You go back inside through the garage, not the front. You badge in like it's any other day. You do not look at that man again. Tomorrow you bring me the note. Understand? Renee, that's not my name to you yet. She handed him the rose. Go. He went. He did it well, for a man who had never done it before. Shoulders down, unhurried, the rose held like an afterthought. Dae Sung's gaze slid over him and moved on. She had maybe 90 seconds. She used them to decide. She could run. She had run once, and it had cost her everything, and bought her 2 years of numb fingers, and she had promised herself, somewhere in the first winter, that she would never again let a CO man's decision be the last word in a room she was standing in. So she did the thing that no one on the 29th floor would predict. She folded her stall. She upended the bucket, water sheeting across the salted concrete, and she stacked the roses into the crook of her arm like a woman closing early, and she walked, not away from the tower, but straight at it, across the plaza, under the awning, toward Park Dae-sung and the doors he was guarding. He saw her at 10 paces. Something moved behind his eyes, a recalculation, and his hand drifted toward the inside of his jacket and stopped there. "The shop's closed," she said, before he could speak. "Tell your employer the florist would like a word. He knows the code. 7 and 1. She let that sit. He'll want to hear it from me before anyone else does." Dae-sung studied her. Snow caught in his short hair and did not melt. He had a scar across his right eyebrow that she remembered from the night he'd been sent to put her on a plane, and she watched him place her face against a 2-year-old memory and arrive, slowly, at the impossible answer. "You're supposed to be gone," he said. "I got better." He didn't smile. He touched his ear, murmured something she couldn't hear, and waited. The doors behind him were smoked glass. She could see her own shape in them, roses spilling from her arm, and behind the shape, a lobby the size of a cathedral. 30 seconds passed, 40. Then the glass split and slid, and a low voice came through the gap. Let her in. She had spent 2 years imagining what she would feel. She had imagined fury, and she had imagined the clean, bright want of finally being seen, and she had imagined nothing at all, a flat, gray patience. She felt all 3 at once, and let none of them reach her face. She stepped past Dae-sung into the warmth of the lobby, and the doors closed behind her, and there, 30 feet away, framed by black marble and a wall of falling water, sat the man who had freed her access and exiled her with a single word. Seo Taehyun did not roll toward her. He waited in the carbon fiber chair with his enormous hands flat on his thighs and let her cross the distance. That was the first move of the negotiation, and she recognized it. And she made him pay for it by stopping short, 10 feet out, well outside the reach of those hands, close enough to talk and far enough to leave. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Water fell down the marble behind him. Snow ticked against the glass at her back. "They told me a woman was selling roses on my corner," he said. His English was low, unhurried, each word set down like a stone. I did not believe the rest of it. "Which rest?" "That it was you." "It's me." His eyes went over her the way Dae-sung's had, but slower, and with a cost he could not fully hide. A tightening at the jaw, a breath held 1 beat too long. 2 years of rumor said the still water had gone stiller after she vanished, had stopped leaving the tower, had let the world come to him. She could believe it. He looked like a man carved and then left in a cold room. "You disappeared," he said. "No airport record, no exit, nothing." "I walked. You didn't think to watch the sidewalks." She shifted the roses higher in her arm. "That's always been the flaw in how you people see. You watch the doors. You never watch the street." Something crossed his face, not quite a flinch. "Why are you here?" "You sent a lawyer down to sniff a bouquet." She let the roses fall, all of them, in a soft red heap on the black floor between them, except one white bloom she kept pinched between 2 fingers. 7 red, 1 white, on the date you froze my access. You remember the date. You built 2 years around it. His hands did not move on his thighs, and that stillness was its own tell. Seong-jin brought the flowers up as a curiosity. Seong-jin brought the flowers up because he recognized them, she said. Because they are his signature too. Because he is the one who has been carrying my roses this whole time. The water fell. The snow ticked. Somewhere above them, in a building she had helped make secure, an accusation was rearranging itself into a different shape, and she watched him feel the ground move. "You're saying, I'm not saying anything in a lobby with cameras your council controls. She stepped closer, one step, deliberate, into a range she had sworn she'd keep out of. You gave me 48 hours once. I asked for 48 hours, and you gave me a plane. Now I'm going to give you 18 days, and you're going to take them, because that's how long you have before the confidence vote strips you of the group your father handed you. His stillness cracked at last, just at the eyes. How do you know about the vote? Because the man who told me about it works on your finance floor, found money that circles through a company with no employees, and got a handwritten note telling him which florist could translate it. She held up the white bloom. You think you've spent 2 years being betrayed by your exiled wife. You've spent 2 years being robbed by the man reading your mail. I can prove it, but not for free, and not on your terms. He looked at the red roses on the floor. He looked at the white one in her hand. Then he did the thing she had not braced for. He brought the chair forward, one push, closing a foot of the distance she'd been guarding, and he looked up at her with those cold, calculating eyes gone, for one unguarded second, entirely human. Name it, he said. Not here. Then upstairs. Not the 29th floor. She shook her head. Not any floor Sungjin can badge into. And not tonight. I have conditions, and I'm going to say them once, and if you argue a single one, I put my roses back in the bucket, and you can lose your company alone. For a man used to being the last word in every room, he took a long time to answer. She counted the water falling. Then he tipped his head a fraction, the smallest surrender she had ever seen a CO make, and said, "Say them." She had rehearsed this in a room above a flower shop for 2 years, without knowing she was rehearsing it. It came out clean. 1. I don't come home. There is no home. There is a job and I do it, and when it's finished I walk back out the door I came in. She waited for him to react to that, and he didn't, and she went on. 2. Everything we do on paper. No servers, no email, no signatures anyone can forge. The reason you never caught this is that you trusted a system a lawyer built. From now on, the record is ink and my handwriting and nothing that lives in a machine. That will slow us to a crawl. That's condition 2, and you don't argue it, remember. She lifted a second finger's worth of patience. 3. Seong-jin does not learn I'm alive until I decide he does. Not from you. Not from Daesung. Not from a look you give him across a table. If he runs before I'm ready, the whistleblowers on your floor die with him, and there are 5 of them, and one of them already trusts a stranger with roses. I won't spend their lives to spare you a hard week. His jaw worked. 5 people inside your walls decided you were worth the risk of a note they couldn't sign. She held his gaze. That's 4 more than defended me at that table. That landed. She saw it land. He looked at the floor between them for the space of 2 breaths, and when he lifted his eyes again, there was a question in them he was too proud to ask, and too far gone to hold back. How do you know it's 5? He said. You've been on a corner for 1 day. I've been on that corner for 2 years. She let him sit with the correction. You think I only started selling roses this week? I've watched your people come and go every morning since the first spring. I know which ones stopped meeting each other's eyes in the lobby. I know which ones started buying flowers they never used to buy. For wives, they told the desk. Except one of them isn't married, and one of them buys white when his wife likes yellow. She shifted the roses in her arm. People who are afraid develop tells. I sell to frightened men for a living now. Malcolm was the 5th to look at my bucket like it was a lifeboat. The other 4 don't know about each other. I'd like to keep it that way. His hands flexed once against his thighs and went flat again. Whatever he had rebuilt of himself in 2 years, she was taking apart with facts, and he was letting her, and that was the most dangerous thing he'd done since the doors opened. You watched my building for 2 years. he said slowly, and never once walked in. I had nothing to walk in with. She met him level. Now I do. He absorbed it the way she remembered him absorbing everything, without flinching, taking the whole weight into that monumental frame, but it landed. 4, she said, softer now, because the last condition was the one that mattered. When it's over, when I've handed you the chain, name by name, page by page, you clear me in the same room you buried me in, the council, on paper, in front of the 12. You don't get to fix this quietly. You broke my name in public, and you'll mend it in public, or you don't get my help at all. Water fell down the marble. He was quiet for a long time. And if I can't get the 12 in a room, he said, you got them in a room to exile me in a night. Her voice did not rise. You'll manage. He looked down at the red roses again, that soft heap on the black floor, and she understood that he was not looking at the flowers. He was looking at the date, at 2 years, at the one word he'd said in a council chamber that had cost him a wife and, apparently, was in the slow process of costing him everything else. There's a 5th thing you haven't said, he said, without looking up. There is. Say it? No. She bent, and she gathered the roses back into her arm, one by one, taking her time, and she left the single white bloom lying on the marble where it had fallen. The 5th thing is mine. You'll get the whole chain of what Songjin did. You will never get the whole chain of what these 2 years did to me. That part isn't for sale, and it isn't part of the job, and if you go looking for it, I walk. Understood? He looked at the white rose on the floor between them. Understood, he said. She straightened. The bucket was outside, empty, filling with snow. Her fingers had stopped hurting the moment she'd walked through the doors, and she hated that warmth from this building could still reach her. 18 days, she said. Where do we work? He was already moving, turning the chair, and the ease with which he took command again, the way the room reorganized itself around his decision, told her exactly how much this place still ran on his word alone. There's an archive, he said. Sub-level. Paper only. My father never trusted machines either. Seong-jin has never once asked to go down there because he thinks there's nothing in it worth reading. Is there? 40 years of the deals that built this company. In ink. He glanced back at her over the colossal shoulder, and for the first time, something almost like the old hymn surfaced, the man she'd married, before a council table turned him to stone. If it's on paper anywhere, it's down there. Then that's where I'll be. She caught Dae-sung in her peripheral vision, still by the doors, still watching, and she stopped. Him. He put me in a car 2 years ago. He follows orders. That's exactly the problem. She turned to face Taehyun fully. Condition 3 has a footnote. Anyone who took an order to make me disappear is a person who can take an order about me again. I want to know who gives Dae-sung his orders when you're not in the room, because I don't think it's always you. That got through. She watched it get through. A slow reassessment behind the black eyes, the sound of a man realizing that the loyalty he'd counted as bedrock might be a floor with a room underneath it. You think Seong-jin? I think you froze my access in one night, flawlessly, with a signature nobody could break, she said. Somebody held my key long enough to sign with it. Somebody knew the rose code that only 6 living people know. Somebody moved money through a company with your loyal man's signature on the founding papers. That's not one lucky lawyer. That's a lawyer with hands inside your security. She let it sit. Dae-sung is security. The lobby was very quiet. Behind Taehyun the water fell, and she remembered, absurdly, that she had chosen that wall, that fountain, in the year she'd redesigned this building's ground floor, had chosen falling water because it masked conversation from the microphones she'd installed herself. He was sitting in front of the one wall in the tower where the two of them could speak and not be recorded. And he didn't know it, and she did, and that was the whole shape of these 2 years in a single fact. "When do we start?" he said. "Now. Send Dae-sung home. Tell him you're working late, alone. Tell him the florist is a nuisance you're handling personally." She almost smiled. "It's even true." He looked at her for a moment longer than the negotiation required. Then he turned the chair toward the bank of elevators at the rear of the lobby, and he said, quietly, in the voice that 2 years ago could clear a room, "Follow me." She didn't. She stood exactly where she was, roses in her arm, and made him stop and turn back. "I don't follow you into elevators," she said. "That's condition 2.5. I walk beside, or I take the stairs." The stairs went down 11 flights to a sub-level. His chair could not take stairs. She knew that. He knew that she knew that. It was a small cruelty, and she meant it as one, not to wound, but to set, permanently on the first day, the exact terms of how the next 18 would run. She was not the woman who'd crossed a lobby to be looked at. She was the woman who'd built the lobby. Something in his face shifted, not anger, recognition. He rolled to the elevator, held the door with one huge hand, and waited. "Beside," he said. She crossed the lobby, and she stepped into the elevator, and she stood beside the chair, not behind it, close enough that the sleeve of his charcoal shirt nearly brushed the wine of her scarf, far enough that nothing touched. The doors closed. He pressed a floor she couldn't see him choose. The car dropped. 2 years, he said, to the doors, not to her. "Don't. I'm not apologizing. You said that part isn't for sale." "Then why say anything?" The car slowed. He looked at her, up at her, from the chair, the one angle at which the still water had never had the advantage and had learned, over years, to weaponize anyway. "Because in 18 days you walk back out that door," he said, "and I would like to have said, once, in a room without cameras, that I knew, the moment you asked for 48 hours and I gave you a plane, that I was wrong. I knew it that night. I have known it every night since." His hands stayed flat on his thighs. "That's not for sale either. I'm giving it away." The doors opened onto a corridor of concrete and steel doors, and the particular dead quiet of a place no one visits. She stepped out first. She did not answer him, because there was no answer that wouldn't cost more than she was willing to spend on the first day, and because the wedding ring on the chain under her dress had gone suddenly, unbearably heavy against her breastbone, and she needed the corridor's cold to steady her before she trusted her own voice. "Which door?" she said. He rolled past her and stopped at the third one on the left, a steel door with a mechanical lock, a wheel, and a key. No card reader, no keypad, nothing a machine could open or a lawyer could log. He fitted a brass key from his own pocket, not from any system, and turned the wheel, and the door groaned back on 40 years of paper. The smell came out first. Old ledger paper, dust, the faint iron of dried ink. Rows of steel shelving vanished into the dark, boxed and labeled by hand, decades deep. "Nobody has catalogued this since my father," he said. "There is no index, there is no map. If Seongjin buried something in a paper deal, it's on one of these shelves, and the only way to find it is to read." He looked at the endless rows, then at her. 18 days. She set her armful of roses down on a steel table just inside the door, red against gray, and she peeled off one dark glove, then the other, and she flexed fingers that had been numb since 8 that morning, and were finally, in the dry, warm dark of the archive, coming back to life. He rolled to the table and watched her hands. He couldn't help it. She saw his eyes go to them and stop, and she knew what he was looking at, even before his gaze climbed to her wrist, the thin, small scar on the inside of the right one. He had asked about it once, years ago, in another life, and she had told him a half-truth, and he had let her keep the rest. He looked at it now like a man reading a page he'd been forbidden to read. "Eyes on the shelves," she said, without heat. "The scars in the same drawer as the 2 years." Both closed. His gaze lifted. "You still wear. Don't finish that." She pulled the lid off the first box. Ledgers. Bound in cloth, dates inked on the spines in a hand she didn't recognize. His father's, probably, or a clerk long dead. "You want to be useful. Tell me how your father organized these. Or was it just chronological chaos and 40 years of trust?" Trust. A dry sound that in another man might have been a laugh. He kept the honest deals up front, and the ones he was ashamed of at the back. "He told me that once. I thought it was a joke." It wasn't. She was already moving down the row, counting boxes, reading spines. Men who build things this size are never joking about where they hide the shame. If Seong-jin learned anything from your father, he learned that. The subsidiary with no employees, the one Malcolm found, it has a founding document, a real one, on paper, with a real signature, because a lawyer who forges digital records still needs one physical original to point to if anyone ever asks. It's here. It has to be here. He'd have filed it himself, and he'd have filed it at the back. Taehyun turned the chair toward the dark end of the rows, where the shelving climbed past the reach of the single caged bulb. "Then we start at the back. We start where I say we start." She didn't look up from the spines. "You gave orders for 40 years. For 18 days you carry boxes, and you read what I hand you, and you don't decide anything without me. That's not a punishment. That's the only way a man who trusted the wrong system learns to trust the room instead. Can you do it?" The bulb hummed. He was quiet, and in the quiet, she heard him weigh a lifetime of being obeyed against 18 days of obeying, and she waited to see which way the still water would run. "Hand me a box," he said. She pulled one from the shelf and set it on his lap, heavier than it looked, 40 years of somebody's careful lies, and his enormous hands closed around it, and for a moment they were only 2 people in a cold room with too much paper and not enough time. "Read the spines out loud," she said. "Every date. I'll tell you which ones we open. And when we find it, you'll want to go up 11 flights and put your hands around a lawyer's throat, and you won't, because condition 3. She slid the next box free. "He doesn't know I'm alive. Right now, that's the only weapon we own that he can't buy, can't forge, and can't freeze. We don't spend it early." He looked at the box in his lap, then at her, and something in the cold black eyes had changed since the lobby. Sharpened, narrowed, aimed, not at her, past her. 11 floors up. "Read," she said again, and reached for the nearest ledger, and slid it off the shelf, and opened it, and began. The first box held nothing. Renee read every spine, ran a gloved thumb down each ledger's edge, and set them back in the order she found them. Taehyun watched her hands more than the pages. She caught him at it, and slid the box off his lap without a word. "Next," she said. He rolled to the shelf, pulled another carton, brought it back. The wheels made a soft sound on the concrete, and then stopped. He balanced the box on his knees the way she'd shown him, spine out, so she could read without lifting. "You sort by what?" he asked. "By the year the ink dried, not the year on the cover." She tapped a date stamped in the corner. "Your father backdated the ugly ones. So the cover lies, the paper doesn't." He didn't ask how she knew that. He'd learned, in one afternoon, that asking cost him time. They worked the way strangers work who used to share a bed, close and careful about it. She named a column, he confirmed a figure, she moved on. 3 boxes. 4. The clock above the door had no second hand, so she counted in ledgers instead of minutes. 9 read, 9 returned. Her fingers ached in a good way now, the numbness gone, replaced by the old paper-cut sting she remembered from the year she rebuilt the family's records by hand. "Stop," she said. On the 10th. A ledger from 11 years back. She held it open at an angle to the bulb. A payment out, a payment back. 3 weeks apart, the return smaller, by exactly the fee a real bank would never charge itself. "There," she said. "First time. Before the subsidiary had a name." He leaned in. His shoulder came close to hers, and she felt the heat of him, and did not move away, which she noted and filed and would think about later, alone. "That's my father's hand," he said. "It's someone copying your father's hand." She set 2 entries side by side. "Look at the 7. Your father crossed it. This one doesn't." She let him look. "A young man learned the family's writing so he could sign for it. He got good. He got so good that 2 years ago he signed for me." Taehyun's jaw worked once. He put the ledger down like it might mark him. "You already knew who," she said. "You've known since the lobby. You just want me to say it so it's mine and not yours." "Say it." "Not yet." She closed the ledger. "A name I say in this room is a name that walks out on your face. You've got a bad face for secrets. You always did." She stacked it in the keep pile, the first thing they'd kept. "We find the founding document, the physical one, then I say it, and it doesn't matter what your face does, because the paper says it louder." He was quiet. Then, low, "You planned this on a corner. For 2 years. I sold roses for 2 years." She peeled off one glove, flexed the hand, put it back on. "The plan took 8 days. The corner took the rest." A knock came down the shaft of the stairwell, 3 floors up, muffled. Taehyun's hand went to the wheel brake. Renee didn't turn. "That's Malcolm," she said. "He's early. He was told tomorrow. You can tell it's him from here. I can tell it's a man who's scared and trying not to run. The scared ones take the stairs. The elevator has a camera." She stood, brushed the dust from her knees. "Let him down, alone. Send Daesung up before you do." Taehyun keyed the earpiece, said a word, listened. "Daesung's at the loading dock, not near the stairs." Then Daesung's watching who comes to the loading dock. She thought about that, and her mouth went flat. Or telling someone. Malcolm came down the last flight with his overcoat, over one arm, and sweat at his collar, though the archive was cold. He stopped 3 steps from the bottom when he saw the wheelchair, and then he saw the woman beside it, and the box on the floor, and something in him understood a piece of the picture without being told the whole. "You," he said to Renee, "you're not just the florist." "No." She held out her hand, palm up. The note. He took an envelope from inside his coat, thin, creased from being carried against his chest. She opened it with 2 fingers, the way she opened everything, slid the paper out, and held it flat under the bulb. 1 line of handwriting, a date, an instruction. "Buy 7 red and 1 white from the woman on the corner and say it out loud." She read it twice. Taehyun watched her read it twice. "Whose?" he said. She turned the paper so he could see it, and set the 11-year-old ledger beside it. The forged 7s lined up under the real one. Same slant, same shy little tail on the letters. The same hand that had copied a dead man for a decade had written the note that brought Malcolm to her corner. "He wrote the note," Taehyun said, "not a question, and not the name. He wrote the note that started the fire that's supposed to burn you." Renee slid both papers apart before Malcolm could lean in and read the ledger. "He didn't know he was writing it to me. He picked my corner because it's the corner across from your door. He wanted a witness who couldn't testify, a homeless woman with a bucket." Her voice didn't rise. "He picked the one witness in this city who taught him the code he's using." Malcolm's eyes moved between them. He set his own trap on your doorstep? He set a trap for a whistleblower. He didn't know the whistleblower would find the one person who could read it. She folded the note back into its envelope and put it inside her coat, in the pocket with the zipper. That's the whole thing, Malcolm. That's why it works. He's too smart to imagine someone smarter is selling flowers in the snow. Malcolm let out a breath that shook on the way. There are others. You said 5. 4 besides you. You don't know them. Good. Keep not knowing them. She stepped closer, dropped her voice under the level where the water wall upstairs would have caught it, though there was no water down here, only concrete. Tomorrow you buy me 2 white roses, just white. You carry them out the front, not the garage. You let the man under the awning see them. Dae-sung. Whoever's under the awning. She held his eyes. White means you're clean and you're staying in. It tells the other 4 the channel's live, and it tells the man reading your mail that a nervous executive bought his wife an apology. Nothing. It means nothing to him. It means everything to them. Malcolm nodded slowly. Then, and if he asks me why white? Then you look at your shoes and you say your wife likes yellow and the shop was out. She almost smiled. One of the 4 says exactly that, every week. It's already an old lie in this building. You'll be the second man telling it. 2 men, same weak excuse. He'll believe it twice as hard. Tae-hyun watched her run the man like an instrument, and something crossed his face that wasn't suspicion. Malcolm climbed the stairs the way he'd come down, slower, a man carrying less than he arrived with. When the door at the top sealed, Tae-hyun said, "You've been building this network from a bucket." They built it. They kept looking at the flowers. She crouched by the keep pile. A man who's being robbed starts noticing small true things. A flower is small and it's true. It's the same every day, or it isn't. They learned to read me before they knew there was anything to read. And the ribbon colors. Wine means talk. White means safe. Yellow means run. She said it plainly, a woman reciting a grocery list, and then she stopped, and she looked at nothing for a second. There's a 4th. Gray. Gray means what? She stood without answering, and pulled the next box. He didn't push. He'd pushed once, upstairs, years ago, and she'd walked into a snowstorm rather than answer. He filed the gray ribbon, where he filed the scar, and the 2 years, and the 5th condition, in the drawer he wasn't allowed to open, and he handed her the box. "Tell me the other 4, he said. Not their names, what they buy. She read as she talked, eyes down the spine. 1 buys a single stem on Fridays, runs accounts payable. Started 6 months ago, right after a vendor he approved turned out not to exist. She turned a page. 1's a woman on the compliance floor. She buys for a birthday every 3 weeks. Nobody has a birthday every 3 weeks. She's flagging days she's afraid of. Another page. 1 never buys. He just reads the bucket and walks on. That's the one I trust most. A man too scared to be seen looking is a man who's already been punished once for looking. And the 4th. The 4th left a note in the water once, folded in the coins. She set the ledger down. It said 1 word. Careful. No name. I've been careful ever since. She looked at him. That's your building, Tae-hyun. 4 people who found a mute woman with flowers, easier to trust than any man on your executive floor. Sit with that number. He sat with it. It cost him something to sit with it, and she watched the cost move across his face, and she let it. You could have come to me, he said. I did come to you, once, on a screen, with my name forged on a transfer. She pulled the next carton. You said 1 word back. It was no. She lifted the lid. So I found 4 people who never got to say a word to you at all, and I gave them a color to say it in. He rolled to the shelf and pulled a box without being asked. It was the first time all night he'd moved before she told him to. "Hand me a box," he said, before she could, and there was something almost like the old hymn in it, the man who used to finish her sentences at the family table, and she hated how much she'd missed it, and she handed him the box. They read until the bulb seemed to dim, though it was only her eyes tiring. The keep pile grew to 4 ledgers, each one a link, money out, money thinner coming back, a signature learning to be someone else's, but no founding document, no paper that said, "On the day the ghost company was born, here is the man who fathered it." "It's not here," Taehyun said, near what she guessed was midnight. "It's here." She set down the ledger, pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes, took them away. He kept the operating records loose, because loose records look innocent. But a founding charter he'd protect. Bound, boxed, mislabeled. She turned in a slow circle, reading the shelves like a face. "Your father put the shameful things in the back. Seong-jin learned from your father. He'd hide it where the shame goes. The back's 40 years deep." Then we go to the back. She started walking between the shelves, one hand trailing the steel, and he rolled after her, and the aisle narrowed until his wheels brushed the uprights on both sides, and he had to stop. "I can't fit," he said. The words came out level, but she heard what was under them, because she'd been married to what was under them. A man built like a mountain who couldn't pass through a 2-foot gap. He said it the way he said everything now, flat, so no one could use it. She'd learned to use everything once. She didn't use this. "Then I go," she said. "You read me the labels from where you are. I'll call back what I find. You go alone into the part of this building where the worst things are filed. I've been alone in worse parts of this city." She was already turning sideways into the gap. 2 years, remember. You gave me practice. It landed. She saw it land, the small flinch at the corner of his mouth, and she was almost sorry, and then she wasn't, because he had refused her 48 hours, with less feeling than he refused her the aisle. Let it land. Some debts you collect in inches. "Wait," he said. She stopped, half into the gap, one shoulder in the dark. "If something's back there that shouldn't be," he said, "you call out. You don't handle it alone, to spare me the aisle." "I've handled everything alone for 2 years to spare you nothing." She said it without heat, but I'll call out. "Not for you, because 2 sets of eyes read a label faster than one, and we have 17 days. She paused. "Read me the ones near the mouth while I go deep. We meet in the middle." He started reading labels off the near shelf in a low, even voice. Years and dead deals, and she answered from the dark with what she passed, and for a stretch the archive filled with the 2 of them naming things to each other across a distance neither would close, which was, she thought, the entire shape of the marriage in one room. She went in. The dark got thicker between the shelves. She read labels aloud by touch and by the phone light she wasn't supposed to have. A burner, no signal, just the torch, which she'd decided was analog enough. Names of dead deals. Years. A box marked Staff Welfare 1998 that weighed too much for welfare. She dragged it out into the aisle behind her and kept moving. "Talk," Taehyun said from the mouth of the aisle. "I can't see you. I'm here. Keep talking. You don't get to want me where you can see me." She said it into the dark. Not cruel, just true. "That's not one of the conditions." Silence. Then his voice, lower than she'd heard it since the lobby. "No, it's not." She stopped at a box on the bottom shelf, back corner, the deepest point of the room. It was labeled in a hand she recognized, not the father's, the son of the father's hand, the copy, the counterfeit, the shy little tail on the letters. The label said, "Archived correspondence, personal." The one category no auditor opens, because personal means widows and funerals and nothing worth a subpoena. Her heart did something it hadn't done in the council room, in the snowstorm, In 2 years of buckets, it moved. I found his hand, she called. Back corner. He labeled a box himself. Down here, where he thought no one who could read it would ever come. Bring it. It's heavy. She got both arms under it. It's the heaviest thing down here. He put weight on the one thing he wanted buried. She lifted, and the cardboard flexed, and she felt through the bottom the hard rectangle of something bound. Not loose papers, a book, a bound register, a charter with a real signature on the founding page. She carried it out of the dark sideways, hugged to her chest like the ring on the chain, and she set it at the wheels of his chair, and she did not open it. "Why aren't you opening it?" he said. "Because when I open it, it says his name, and once it says his name in front of both of us, I've spent the one thing I have that he doesn't know exists." She rested a gloved hand flat on the lid. "Right now, he thinks a florist got curious. The second I open this, I'm his enemy again, alive, in his building. I don't open it until I know where he is, who's near you, and whether the man under the awning tells him things. Dae-sung's been with me 9 years. Seong-jin's been with your family 30. She looked up at him from where she knelt. Loyalty's just a length of time nobody's tested yet. He held her eyes. 9 years of trust in one man and 30 in another, and a woman on her knees in front of him, telling him both numbers were guesses. Something in his face gave way, not all of it, an edge of it. "Then we test it," he said. "How?" "You said gray means run." He rolled the chair back an inch so he could see all of her. "We send one gray rose to nobody, a gray ribbon, no name, left where Dae-sung will find it. And we watch who Sung-jin looks at tomorrow." She sat back on her heels. She hadn't expected him to build a trap. She'd expected to build them all and hand him the levers. This was his, small and mean and clever, and it was the first thing he'd offered her in 2 years that she wanted to take. "That's good," she said, and she watched him absorb the 2 words like a man who hadn't eaten in a season. "That's actually good. But we don't do it yet." "Why?" "Because gray is mine." Her voice thinned. "Gray ribbon means something already, to someone, and I won't spend it on a test." She stood, brushed the dust off, put the box between them like a border. "We use white. White's cheap. White we can burn." He watched her not explain the gray ribbon for the second time in one night, and this time he understood it was a wound and not a code, and he let it stay closed. "How long do we have," she said, to change the subject, and because it mattered. 17 days to the vote. 17. She looked at the 4 ledgers in the keep pile, and the heavy box she wouldn't open, and the 40 years of dark behind her. 17 days to prove a man forged your family for a decade, and I can't touch a computer, and you can't fit down the aisle, and the man who can carry boxes for me might be reporting to the man we're hunting. You make it sound impossible. It is impossible. She pulled off her gloves finger by finger and laid them on the box. That's why it'll work. He's counted every way this could be done and crossed them all off, because every way runs through a machine or a signature or a witness he can buy. He never crossed off a woman with a bucket and a bad marriage and a memory that doesn't delete. She almost smiled again and stopped it. I'm the option he didn't insure against. Taehyun looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket, passed the bronze key, and took out something small and set it on the lid of the box beside her gloves. A folded square of paper, soft at the creases from being carried a long time. She looked at it. She didn't touch it. "What is that?" "The last thing you gave me," he said, "before the council. You left it on the desk. I kept it." Her hand hovered. She knew what it was before she opened it, and opening it was a machine she didn't want to run, but she ran it anyway, because 2 years had taught her that the things you refuse to look at are the things that get used against you. She unfolded it. A pressed flower, flat, brown at the edges, colorless with age. A single rose, and threaded through the stem, so old it had gone the gray of ash. A ribbon. Gray. Her breath stopped. She stood very still, the way she'd stood in the council room when the transfer went up on the screen. The stillness of a woman whose center has just been touched by a hand she thought was gone. "You kept it," she said. "Barely. I didn't know what gray meant." He watched her face, and for once he didn't flatten his own. "You gave it to me, and I put it in a drawer, because a man doesn't ask his wife why the ribbon's gray when he's late for a council that's about to ruin her. I kept it because it was the last thing your hands made before I—" He stopped. "Before I handed you the knife." She held the dead flower and its ash-colored ribbon, and she understood, all at once, in the cold 11 floors under the street, that she had walked into this building with one weapon he didn't know she had, and he had just laid down one she didn't know he'd kept, and they were even in a way that terrified her more than being enemies. "Gray means," she started, and her voice broke on the second word, and she stopped, and she put the flower down on the box, very carefully, on top of her gloves, and she did not finish the sentence. "Because gray meant danger to the one you love. Gray meant I know something is coming, and it's coming for you." She had grown gray ribbons in Lorraine's cooler for 2 years and sent them to no one, because there had been no one to warn, and she had given him one, the last morning, the morning of the council, and he had put it in a drawer. She had warned him. She had warned him, and he had filed the warning next to his cufflinks and gone to a room and let a lawyer bury her. "You had it," she whispered. "The whole time. I told you, and you kept it in a drawer. I didn't know. I know you didn't know, and that was worse." That was so much worse than betrayal that her hands started to shake, because betrayal she could hate, and this she could only grieve. "You couldn't read the one thing I couldn't say out loud. I gave you the warning in the only language I had left, and you thought it was a flower." He said nothing. There was nothing to say that wasn't a machine. She picked the pressed rose back up. She held it for a moment against the ring under her coat, the 2 dead things that had outlived the marriage, and then she folded the paper around it, exactly as it had been folded, along the soft old creases, and she held it out to him. "Keep it," she said. "You're not done paying for it." He took it. Their gloves were off, both of them, and their fingers touched over the paper, and neither pulled back fast, and that was the most either of them could stand. 17 days, she said again, steadier now, folding the grief back into the drawer he'd taught her to build. "We open the box when I say, send Malcolm his white roses, don't touch Daesung, and find me a way down that back aisle, because there's more in the dark than one charter, and you're going to want to see it before he does." "I can't fit the aisle," he said. "Then take the arms off the shelves." She was already pulling her gloves back on, the flower gone, the woman back. "You own the building. Unbolt it." Something moved through him, the first thing that looked, in 2 years, like a man deciding to build instead of to bury. He set the pressed flower in his breast pocket, over the same place she kept the ring, and he put both hands on the wheels. "Hand me a box," he said. She did, and they went back to the shelves, the heavy sealed one sitting between them unopened, a name inside it neither had spoken, a gray ribbon now in his pocket, and a fresh crack running straight through the middle of everything she'd built to keep from feeling exactly this, and above them, 17 floors up and 1 man deep, someone who had labeled a box personal in a dead man's hand was, at that hour, asking the front desk which florist on which corner had sent a lawyer a white rose. And downstairs, in the dark, she read the next label out loud, and her voice did not shake, and that was its own kind of lie. The label said nothing worth keeping, and she moved to the next box, and the one after that, and somewhere past the fourth, her hand stopped on a folder that did not belong. It was thinner than a ledger. It had no year on the spine. She pulled it free and held the torch close, and saw the header of a message thread, printed, 3 pages, stapled once in the corner, by a hand that liked its corners square. She knew the thread before she read it. It was the thread from the council, the one with her seal on it. Someone had kept a paper copy down here, in the dark, 11 floors under the room where it had been used to bury her. "Come here," she said. Taehyun rolled the chair to the mouth of the aisle. He could not fit past the shelf. She carried the pages to him and laid them on the box in his lap and put the torch where they could both see. "This is the thread," he said. "A copy of it, filed by the same hand that copied your father." She turned to the second page. Her finger stopped on a line halfway down, a line that had never mattered to the fraud, a line that had only ever been there to make the forgery feel like her. She read it once with her eyes and did not read it out loud. Taehyun read it. She watched his jaw work. The line said, "You always fold the last light before you lock the door." He put 2 fingers on the paper as if to hold it still. "That's not from a deal. No, that's from the house. Yes." She took the torch and moved it down the page. There was another, further along, dropped into a sentence about a wire transfer that never happened, sitting there like a stone in bread. And "Tell me the thing you never tell the room." And below that, wrapped around a fake account number, 4 words that did not belong to any bank on earth. "The cold side of the bed." Taehyun stopped breathing for a moment. She saw it in his chest, the way it held and then let go. "Those are ours," he said. "They're ours." "How?" She did not answer yet. She turned the last page over and looked at the back of it, at the faint pressure marks where a pen had rested on the sheet above it before it was pulled from a stack. Whoever printed these had printed something else in the same tray. She held it flat under the light and tilted it until the ghost of the letters caught. "Someone typed these into the forgery on purpose," she said. "Not the numbers. The numbers, anyone with your seal could fake. The numbers were the crime. These." She touched the cold side of the bed. These were the signature. This is what made 12 people believe it was me. Because only I would say this. Because only you would know I'd said it. To no one. To one person. She looked at him. "In a room we paid to sit in." He went still in a way she had not seen since the lobby. She let the silence do its work. Then she turned the pages again, slower, the way you turn a body over to find the wound. There was a rhythm to how the private lines were placed. Never at the top of a message, where a reader skims. Always buried mid-paragraph, wedged between a routing number and a timestamp, where the eye had already decided the message was about money and stopped looking for anything else. Whoever seeded these knew exactly how a council reads. They knew the room would feel the truth of the marriage without ever noticing it had been handed the marriage on a plate. "Look how they're set," she said. "Not decoration, placement. Each private line is load-bearing. Pull it, and the sentence around it goes soft. The fake numbers stop sounding like me. He didn't garnish the forgery with our words. He built the forgery on them. The intimacy is the foundation. The crime is the house he put on top." Taehyun's eyes moved down the page, and she watched him see it, the architecture of it, the patience. "How long would this take," he said, "to do this well?" "Months." You don't listen to 8 months of 2 people and pull 4 perfect lines in an afternoon. You have to know which sentence will make a stranger believe. You have to have listened the way. She stopped. The way someone listens who's looking for a weapon and has all the time in the world to find it. "Say it," she said. "Therapy." The word came out of him like it cost money. "We went to a..." For 8 months, before the council. You stopped going 4 sessions before I did. She kept her voice level because if she let it move, he would hear the 2 years in it. You said it was noise. You said talking about the marriage was how people talked themselves out of one. I remember what I said. So do they. She lifted the pages an inch. Every word we said in that room is in this forgery, not paraphrased, verbatim, the cold side of the bed. I said that in the 4th session. I know the session because you weren't there for the 5th. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The archive ticked with the small sounds old paper makes when it is disturbed after years of being left alone. Recordings, Taehyun said. The office recorded. The office recorded. For continuity, they said. Locked, they said. Hours, they said. She set the pages down on the box, squared them, because her hands needed something square to do. Somebody unlocked them. He looked at the shelves around them, at 40 years of his father's paper, and she watched him understand that the archive was not the deepest room in the building. There was a deeper one, and it had their voices in it. Who holds the office? He said. That's the box we haven't opened. She did not look at the heavy carton across the aisle, the one marked. Archived correspondence, personal. But she felt it there the way you feel a person standing behind you, and I'm not opening it on a hunch. A hunch dies in a council room. I need the office traced to a hand, on paper, tonight. You can't trace a therapy practice from a basement. No, she was already pulling her glove back on, one finger at a time. But she can. Kim Eun-sol came down the stairs at 7 the next morning, with a notebook under her arm, and snow still melting in her hair, and she stopped 4 steps from the bottom when she saw the wheelchair, and then she saw Renee, and her face did the arithmetic that Malcolm's face had done, and she got the same wrong answer, and then the right one. You're the florist, Yoon In-sul said. I'm the florist. You're not the florist. No. Yoon In-sul came down the last 4 steps. She was 32 and slight, and she wore a gray suit that had been pressed by someone who cared, and she held the notebook like a shield and a sword at once. She looked at Taehyun the way you look at a photograph of a man you have only heard about in warnings. He knows you're here, Renee said. That's the whole risk, so decide now, at the bottom of the stairs, whether you're a woman who came down or a woman who's about to go back up. Nobody will chase you up. Yoon-sol looked at the stairs behind her. Then she looked at the pages Renee held out. What am I reading? She said, and came the rest of the way. Renee gave her the thread. She did not tell her what to see. That was the whole method. You handed a careful person a careful thing, and you let them be careful at it. Yoon-sol read standing up, lips moving on the numbers, and then her lips stopped moving, and she read the lines that were not numbers, and her eyes came up. These are personal, Yoon-sol said. Yes. These are, she looked at Renee, then at Taehyun, and had the grace to look at the floor. These are between 2 people. They were. Eun-sol turned to the 2nd page. This phrasing. This isn't lifted from letters. Letters have a shape. This has pauses. This is transcribed speech. Someone wrote this down while it was being said. She looked up sharply. Or while it was being played back. Renee felt something in her chest come loose, just slightly, the specific relief of being read correctly by a stranger. Keep going. A practice that records has to store. Storing patient audio isn't free, and it isn't casual. There's a vendor. There's always a vendor. A compliance host, an encryption service, somebody who holds the keys and bills for it monthly. Yoon-sol was already flipping her notebook open, already writing, and her handwriting was fast and small and it did not slope. If I can find the therapy practice, I can find who they paid to hold the recordings, and whoever holds the recordings is who leaked our voices into a forgery, Renee said. Is who the forger worked for, Yoon In-sol corrected, gently, and Renee felt the difference land. Not the forger's employer, the hand behind the hand. Taehyun spoke for the first time since Yoon Sol came down. The practice was called Bridgewater, downtown, third floor of a building we no longer own. Yoon Sol wrote it. Closed? Closed a year after we stopped going. I got a letter. Files transferred to a records custodian for the mandatory retention period. He said it flatly, a man reading a receipt. I threw the letter away. It seemed like the smallest thing that had happened that year. Do you remember the custodian's name? No. Good, Yoon Sol said, and both of them looked at her. If you remembered it, it would be a name they wanted you to remember. The one that matters is the one you were never meant to see. She snapped the notebook shut against her palm. I need 40 minutes and a machine that isn't yours. Nothing that's ours, Renee said. Nothing on a CO device, nothing on a CO network, nothing that touches a badge reader. Library on 5th has public terminals and a corporate filings desk. Custodians are licensed. Licenses are public. Shell subsidiaries file annual reports nobody reads. Yoon Sol was already on the second stair. Give me the practice name and a reason to have skipped breakfast. You have both, Renee said. Yoon Sol went up. The door at the top opened on a wedge of gray light and closed. Renee stood at the mouth of the aisle a moment, listening to the footsteps climb. 5 whistleblowers had looked at her bucket like a lifeboat, and not one of them had read her the way this woman had read 3 stapled pages in 90 seconds. Yoon Sol had walked down a stairwell into the worst room in the building, and, given a stranger's ruined marriage, had found the seam in it before she found a chair. That was the kind of eye that won councils. That was also the kind of eye that got people killed if it moved too fast. She'll find it, Renee said. The question is whether she knows to be quiet after she does. Certainty makes people loud. You'll teach her. In 40 minutes? No. I'll scare her instead. Faster. She turned and found Taehyun looking at the pages in his lap and not at her. You never told me, he said. Told you what? That you kept going. After I stopped. 4 more sessions. You weren't in the room. There was nothing to tell you. She crouched to gather the empty boxes they'd cleared, because the alternative was standing there while he did the math on the sessions he'd skipped. I went because I'd paid for the 8, and I don't waste things. And because the woman running it asked me a question in the 5th session that I wanted 8 days to not answer, and I gave it 4. What was the question? She stacked a box. That's the 5th session. You bought 4. She heard him take a breath to push, and she cut it off before it became a question she'd have to refuse twice. The reason it matters, and the reason I won't hand it to you cheap, is that whatever I said in that 5th session is in a machine Sung-jin owns. If I tell you now, in this room, out loud, and I'm wrong about the water wall and the microphones, then I've handed him a second recording of the same confession, 2 years fresher, so no. Not because I'm cruel, because he taught me what happens to the things I say where anything can listen. Taehyun was quiet. He taught us both. He taught us both. She stacked another box, harder than she needed to. The difference is, you get to be angry about it in public, in 16 days. I've been angry about it alone for 2 years on a street corner. So forgive me if I ration the 5th session. He almost smiled. It was the worst thing he could have done, and she stood up fast and put a shelf between them. For a while they worked without speaking. She sorted the cleared boxes. He stacked the therapy pages face down on his knee, unwilling, she noticed, to leave the words facing up in the light. Twice his hand moved to turn them over and read again, and twice it stopped. Don't, she said, without looking. I wasn't. You were about to reread the 4th session so you can feel it more. Feeling it more doesn't get us the custodian. It gets you a wall to hit and me a partner with a broken hand. She set a box down. He's had years to feel it. He turned feeling into a filing system. If we're going to beat a man who kept our voices in a drawer, we have to be colder about them than he was, just for 16 days. Taehyun looked at the pages. Then he set them, deliberately, face down, in the center of the empty box, and put his hands back on the shelf. There, he said, cold, colder than that. Give me a box. She gave him a box, and something in her chest eased a fraction, because a man doing a task is a man not falling into a hole, and she needed him whole for what came at 9. Yoon-sol came back at 9:40 with snow on her shoulders, and a folded printout in her coat, and a face that had stopped being careful, and started being certain, which was a more dangerous thing. Bridgewater Counseling closed and moved its records to a custodian called Still Harbor Records Management, she said, before she reached the bottom. Still Harbor is a compliance host, holds regulated files for practices that shut down. Boring, legitimate, bills monthly. She unfolded the printout on the box in Taehyun's lap, on top of the therapy thread, one paper over the other. Still Harbor has one client of note, and 40 of nothing. It's a subsidiary. Renee brought the torch of a holding company 2 layers up. The holding company has no employees. It has one authorized signatory on the founding filing. Yoon-sol put her finger on a line and did not say the name because she was learning, fast, that in this basement, you let the paper say it. Read the signature block. Renee read it. She had known it since the lobby, the way Taehyun had known it since the lobby, and she had refused to say it for 2 chapters of her own life. And now it was printed on a public filing, under a library's fluorescent light, with a stranger's finger under it. The signatory was Kwon Sung-jin. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Taehyun made a sound that was not a word. He founded the company that holds the recordings, Unsol said, quiet now, careful again, because certainty had frightened her back into care. The company that holds the recordings of the 2 of you saying that. She would not look at the lines. He's had them the whole time, since before the council. He didn't intercept your voices. He stored them. He was paid to keep them safe. He signed the paper that made him their keeper. Renee stood very straight. She felt the ring against her breastbone, cold through the dress, colder than the room. Say the shape of it, all the way. Yoon and Sol did. The man who runs the family's law also runs a shell that holds the family's most private recordings. He took what you said to each other in a room meant to save the marriage, and he used it to make the forgery sound like you. Not the money. Anyone could fake the money, the intimacy. He weaponized the intimacy, because a court believes a number, but 12 people at a table believe. The cold side of the bed. Because who else would know? Who else would know? Taehyun repeated, and his hands closed on the arms of the chair. Renee crouched in front of him so she was under his eyeline, so he had to look at her, and not at the wall he wanted to put his fist through. Look at me. Not up there. Here. She waited until his eyes came down. This is the reframe. Get it right, or you'll spend the next 16 days angry at the wrong crime. You didn't fail to defend me because the evidence was good. The evidence was good. Because he built it out of us. He didn't beat your judgment. He counterfeited your wife using your own marriage as the mint. You were never going to see through it, because it was made to sound exactly like the woman you'd stopped listening to. Taehyun's breath came ragged once and then evened, the discipline reasserting, and she watched the still water close back over. But something had changed under it. He was not looking at her as a problem anymore. He was looking at her as a debt with a face. He was in the sessions, Taehyun said slowly. Not the room, the recordings. All these years, he heard. He stopped. He heard you say things you wouldn't say to me by the 5th session, and he kept them in a drawer with a monthly bill on them like they were nothing, and when he needed a knife, he pulled them out. Yes, That's not a fraud. His voice dropped to almost nothing, and Yoon-sol took a step back without deciding to. That's a man who sat in our bed and took notes. Yoon-sol had gone pale at the edges. She spoke without being asked, which was its own tell of how far the certainty had pushed her. There's a worse part, and you should hear it from the person who read the filing, not figure it out at midnight. She turned the printout over. Still Harbor bills the practice's estate monthly for storage, which means the recordings weren't a one-time grab he made when he needed a weapon. They're a subscription. He's been paying, every month, for 2 years, to keep them. He didn't take the knife and throw it away. He kept the knife sharp, on a standing order, in case. The archive held very still. In case of what? Taehyun said. In case she came back, Renee answered, before Yoon-sol could. In case the florist on the corner turned out to be the one person alive who could read the code and name the hand. He kept the recordings because a forgery you can rebuild is a forgery you can't be cornered on. If I ever produced proof it was fake, he could produce fresh audio of me saying the very lines that made it look real, and drown me all over again. She felt the cold of the ring against her sternum and did not touch it. He didn't keep our marriage as a souvenir. He kept it as insurance against me. Renee did not soften it. Softening it now would be its own lie. That's the man who's going to be on the wrong side of a table in 16 days, and the only reason he still thinks he'll win is that he believes the florist got curious and went home. She stood. Which is why we don't touch Still Harbor. We don't subpoena it, we don't spook it, we don't let one badge query hit one server. The recordings are his gun. The second he knows we've seen the filing, he burns them, and it's my word against a shredder. Yoon-sol closed her notebook. So what do we do with it? We do nothing with it. Today. We know it. Knowing it is the whole move. Renee took the library printout and folded it once and slid it into the inside pocket, the one with the zipper, next to the note that had brought Malcolm to her corner. He built me out of my own voice. Fine. When the room hears the truth, it's going to hear it out of my own voice too. In person, alive, which is the one recording he doesn't have. She looked at Taehyun. You wanted to know the 5th session question, she said. He went still. She asked me what I'd do if you ever chose the room over me. Renee picked up the torch. I took 4 sessions not to answer because I already knew, and I didn't want to have said it out loud where a machine could hear. Turns out it heard everything else. She turned toward the deep aisle. Get the arms off the shelf. We have work. Strip the arms off that back shelf. He doesn't get to be the only one who kept a copy. Behind her, she heard Taehyun set the therapy pages down, square in the center of the box, and then the small mechanical sound of a man beginning, without being told, to take a shelf apart with his hands. 16 days. A shell with their voices in it, signed by a man 30 years trusted, and in the inside pocket, zipped shut against her ribs, the one proof he never thought a florist could hold. That the marriage he'd melted down for parts had a witness left alive who could still speak in her own voice. Yoon-sol did not go back up the stairs. She set her notebook on a shelf edge and looked at the two of them, at the wheelchair and the woman in the dark and the pages face down between them, and Renee watched her arrive at the thing careful people arrive at last, which is that being right is not the same as being safe. They'll know I pulled the filing, Yoon-sol said. Library terminals log, if anyone audits Still Harbor's public record for who's been reading it. Public filings get read, students read them, journalists read them. One query from a terminal on 5th is noise. Renee crouched and picked up the woman's notebook and handed it back to her, closed. What isn't noise is you. From this morning on, you don't say his name in a building he can afford. You don't say Still Harbor. In an elevator. You don't put any of this in anything with a battery. Everything you find, you find on paper and you bring it down these stairs. If you can't do that, tell me now and go teach a class, and no one will think less of you. Yoon Sol looked at the notebook in her hands. Then she opened it to a clean page and uncapped her pen, and it was answer enough. Where do I start? She said. You already did. Renee stood and turned toward the deep aisle, toward the heavy carton she had carried out of the dark and had not yet let herself open. He's been paying to keep our voices for 2 years, thinking no one would ever be able to make them speak against him. 16 days. Get the arms off the shelf. She heard, behind her, the small mechanical sound of a man beginning, without being told, to take his father's shelving apart with his hands. It's time we found the one thing in this building he never thought to pay for, the original, in ink, in the back. The bracket came free in Taehyun's hands, with a sound like a bone giving way. He set it across his knees and rolled the chair forward, into the gap where the shelf arm had been. Renee went past him into the narrow aisle, torch low, and reached the founding document in ink before either of them had spoken again. It was bound in oxblood board, cracked at the spine, thinner than a decade of theft should weigh. She carried it out flat on both palms. She did not open it. Not yet, she said, before he could ask. She laid it on the box marked personal, one weapon on top of another, and stood back from both. Her fingers had stopped hurting hours ago. That worried her more than the ache had. Then her burner buzzed once against her hip. She had told 4 people the number. 2 of them were in this room. She read the screen with the torch cupped over it. Lorraine. 6 words. Men here with paper. Come now. Renee was moving before the light finished dying. What? Taehyun said. Stay. She was already at the stair. Read nothing. Open nothing. If Yoon Sol comes down, she came down. Nobody touches the box. Renee. 16 days, she said. Keep them. She took the 11 flights the way she'd taken the sidewalk 2 years before. Fast, quiet, on her own feet, choosing the route no camera watched. The service stair let her out through the loading dock. The blizzard had thinned to a hard gray sleet. She kept the scarf up and walked the 4 blocks to the flower shop with her chin down and her hands loose, the way a woman walks when she has decided not to run so that no one decides to chase. There was a black sedan at the curb. There was a second man under the awning who was not buying flowers. Renee did not slow. Inside, Lorraine stood behind the counter with both hands flat on the wood, the way you hold a thing down so it can't shake. Her glasses hung on their gold chain. Across from her, a man in a graphite suit laid a single sheet of paper on the counter and turned it so the letterhead faced her. Not Seongjin, a clerk. Behind him, closer to the buckets, stood Park Dae-sung, gloves on, saying nothing, watching the door. He watched Renee come through it. You're supposed to be busy, she said to him, and let the door chime finish before she crossed to the counter. Lorraine's shoulders dropped an inch when she saw her. They say the shop's theirs now. The clerk cleared his throat. The note was purchased this morning. Full assignment. Ms. Brooks is 90 days behind, which under the acceleration clause. Which note? Renee said. He blinked. The building note. The debt on this property. Who bought it? A holding company. I'm authorized to. Still Harbor? She said, and watched his face for the flinch. It didn't flinch, which told her he didn't know the name mattered, which told her he was real, which told her the debt was real, which told her the timing was not a coincidence at all. Lorraine looked between them. Baby, what's Still Harbor? Renee took the paper off the counter and read it top to bottom. Assignment of note, notice of default, a repossession date stamped for the end of the month, 3 days before the vote. The signature block on the assignment gave a corporate name she'd never heard, and, beneath it, an authorized agent whose name she had, the same shell architecture, the same fingerprints, a new mask over a face she already knew. He'd found the corner. He didn't know she was the florist. He'd never known. He knew only that a white rose had gone up to the 29th floor from this shop, on this corner, and that the fastest way to close a mouth you can't name is to close the building it stands in. "How much?" Renee said. The clerk named a number. It was not enormous. It was the size of a florist's back rent and a florist's small loan, and it was more than a florist and a woman who sold roses on a corner had between them, and Sungjin had bought it the way a man buys a light bulb. 90 days, Renee said. She's been late before. Nobody accelerated before. The new holder has chosen to enforce the terms. The clerk said it like a weather report. Dae-sung shifted his weight by the buckets. Water had pooled where a bloom had dripped. He looked at it, and then at Renee's hands, and then at her face, and something moved behind his eyes that she filed and did not name. "You brought security to serve a florist a piece of paper," Renee said to him. "That's a lot of man for one old woman." "I go where I'm sent," Dae-sung said. "By who, when he's not in the room?" He held her look for a beat too long. Then the clerk was gathering his copy, sliding a second copy across to Lorraine, saying words about rights and remedies and a phone number, and the two men were leaving, the chime going twice, the sedan door thunking, the gray street swallowing them. Lorraine sat down hard on the stool behind the counter. 2 years, she said. 2 years, you sold flowers on that corner and never told me your husband was somebody, and now somebody's taking my shop, and you know his name, and you look like the roof already fell, and you're just waiting for me to notice. Renee put the assignment paper flat on the counter. She smoothed it with one glove. "Give me the day," she said. "I'll have your shop back." "You don't have that kind of money, baby. I've seen your coat." "I don't need money. I need the paper he made, and I have it." Lorraine looked at her a long moment. Then she reached under the counter and set a shoebox between them. Old, corners furred soft. "Then you'd better see the rest of it," she said. "Because a man came last week too, before the sleet. Asked about you." Renee's hand stopped on the paper. "Not these two. A different one. Suit, glasses, gray at the sides." Lorraine's voice had gone careful. "Bought a white rose, paid cash. Asked how long the girl who works the corner had worked it. I said years. He asked, did you ever get mail here? I said no." She pushed the shoebox an inch closer. "He left this the day after. Said it came for you. I didn't open it. It's got your old name on it, Renee. The married one. The one you never gave me." Sungjin had stood in this shop, had bought a rose, had used the married name, which meant he knew, which meant everything Renee had built on the belief that he didn't know she was alive had been built on air, and she had walked 11 floors down and back up every day for 4 days inside a plan whose first stone was already gone. She made herself breathe once, slow, the way the therapist had taught her to, in the room she'd stopped going to. She opened the shoebox. Inside, a slim folder. Inside the folder, a single sheet. A printout, machine clean, no ink, no hand. A record of a text message, timestamp 2 years old, 3 days before the family council, sent from a number registered to her, received by a number she didn't recognize. The message read, "They're moving on the shop and on me. If it goes wrong, protect Lorraine's lease. I'll take the rest." She read it twice. She had never sent it, but it wore her signature the way the transfer had worn her signature, the way the thread had worn her seal, perfectly, from the inside, by the hand that had learned to be her. And it did the thing the forgery always did, the thing that made it deadly. It told a truth to sell a lie. She had worried about the shop. She had worried about Lorraine, later, after. for 2 years. He had reached back in time and made her worry into evidence. Because this message, dated 3 days before the council, said one thing to anyone who read it cold. It said she'd known. It said she had known the sabotage was coming before it came. It said she'd made arrangements. It said the woman who'd stood in the Council of 12 asking for 48 hours had spent those hours not defending herself, but covering a florist's lease, because she'd been in it, because there was no innocent way to know a thing before it happened. "I didn't write this," Renee said. "I know you didn't," Lorraine said, and then, softer, "the worst thing. Do you know that, for sure? Because your face just did something." Renee's face had done something. Her face had done the thing a face does when it meets its own handwriting, saying a thing it might have thought. She folded the sheet along its old crease and put it in the inside pocket, the one with the zipper, on top of the library printout and Malcolm's note. 3 papers now that could hang her or save her, depending on who read them and in what order. "I have to go back," she said. "To him? To the archive. Baby." Lorraine caught her wrist, the right one, over the scarf, over the sleeve, not knowing about the scar under it, thumb landing exactly where the thin line was. Renee held still and let her. "If that man knows your name, and he knows my shop, and he's got paper that says you knew, then you walking back in there isn't fixing my lease. It's you walking to the same table that already ate you once. I watched you not talk about it for 2 years. I'm not going to watch you get eaten twice for my back rent." "He didn't eat me," Renee said. "He swallowed and I didn't go down." She lifted Lorraine's hand off her wrist, gently, and set it back on the counter. "Lock the door behind me. Don't sign anything. Don't call the number. If either of those 2 comes back, you sell them a rose, and you smile and you tell them nothing, and you buzz my number once. 1 buzz. I'll know." She was at the door when Lorraine said, "What's the white rose mean?" He kept looking at the white ones. Renee stopped with her glove on the handle. "It means the one clean thing in a lie," she said. "That's why he keeps a white one, so the lie looks like it's telling the truth." She went back out into the sleet. She did not go straight to the tower. She walked 1 block past it, to the mouth of the parking structure, and she stood in the exhaust-warm dark and made herself do the arithmetic before she let herself feel any of it. Seongjin knew her name. Seongjin had bought the shop's debt. Seongjin had planted, 2 years deep, a record that turned her innocence into foreknowledge. He hadn't done all 3 this week. The debt he could have bought this week. The message he had planted then, back when he built the rest. An insurance line coiled in the same nest as the therapy audio, a second gun, aimed not at her guilt, but at Taehyun's trust, kept loaded for exactly the day she came back, and someone believed her. He'd built for her return before she'd even fled. That was the part that took the air out of her. He hadn't beaten a florist who got curious. He'd outthought the wife 2 years before she picked up a bucket. She went in through the loading dock. She took the service stair down. Taehyun was where she'd left him. The box and the oxblood book untouched. The removed bracket still across his knees, like something he'd forgotten he was holding. He heard her feet on the last flight and turned the chair. "The shop?" he said. "His. As of this morning, accelerated. Repossession the 27th. She said the numbers flat. 3 days before the vote. His jaw worked once. "I'll pay it." "You can't. Not without moving money, and the second you move money he sees you saw. Then he knows we're inside." She set her hip against the steel shelving. That's not the part. She took the folded sheet out of the zip pocket and held it, not opening it, the way she'd held the box, the way she'd held the book. "He was in the shop," she said. "Last week, before any of this. Bought a white rose, cash, asked how long the corner girl had worked the corner, used my married name to the old woman." She watched his face take each piece. He knows I'm alive. He's known everything I told you that first night, that he can't know until I decide. He already knew before I decided anything. Taehyun went still in the particular way that meant he was rearranging the whole board behind his eyes and hated what it made. Then the plans. The plans changed, not dead. She turned the sheet in her fingers. There's this. He left it at the shop for me, in my name, 2 years old. She opened it and laid it on the box, next to the book, and put the torch on it so he could read the machine-clean lines. A text, from my number, 3 days before the council, saying I knew they were moving on me, saying to protect the lease, saying I'd take the rest. She watched him read it. She watched him read it twice, the way she had. She watched the exact half-second where the sentence did its work. He looked up, and the thing that was in his face was not anger. It was worse than anger, because it was the old thing, the thing from the council table, the pause before the one word. It was doubt, with the light coming back on behind it. You knew, he said, quiet, not a question. The same 4 words a wife had once thrown at a man in another script, turned around now and handed back. No, it's your number. It's the number he made mine. Same as the transfer, same as the seal. You saw the 7, and the not cut 7 11 floors down. You believed the ink then. Her voice stayed level and cost her everything to keep there. This is machine. No ink, no hand, nothing to line up against the ledger. He learned. He stopped leaving the tell. This one you can't test. So it works on the one thing that isn't paper. On what? On you. She let that sit. He didn't aim this at the council. He aimed it at you, in this room, on this day, for the exact minute I'd need you to believe me, and you'd have a piece of paper in my name, telling you not to. Taehyun looked at the sheet. His hand rose toward it and stopped. If you knew, he said slowly, 3 days before, if there was a message, then when you asked for 48 hours, you weren't asking to find the traitor. You were asking for time to finish it, say it, to arrange things, to cover the shop, to take the rest. He wasn't shouting. That was what frightened her. He was reasoning, the way he'd reasoned at the table, building the clean case that fit the paper, because the paper was in front of him, and she was only a person. 2 years I told myself I was wrong, and the first hard paper you can't explain, and you're already back in the chair at the council, she said. 1 sheet, that's all it took the first time too. The archive went quiet except for the compressor hum somewhere in the walls. She could have shouted. She'd shouted at the table 2 years ago. She'd said even you, and walked out and let it cost her everything. She had learned, in 2 winters on a corner, what shouting bought. It bought you the dignity of the door closing behind you. So she didn't shout. She reached into the zip pocket and took out the second paper, the library printout, and set it beside the message, in the torchlight, so the 2 lay together. Read them as a pair, she said. He pays Still Harbor every month to keep the therapy audio sharp. You saw that this morning, in Yunan Sol's hand. Insurance, in case I came back and proved the words were stolen. Now look at this. She tapped the message. Insurance, in case the audio wasn't enough. In case I got a man like you to start believing me. This is the backup gun. He planted it in the same season he planted everything. A man doesn't build a second trap for a wife he thinks is guilty and gone. He builds it for a wife he's afraid will one day be believed. Taehyun's eyes moved between the 2 sheets. The forgery proves I'm innocent, she said. That's the thing he never planned for. The very existence of a fake me made this carefully, 2 years before I came back. That's not what you do to someone who did it. That's what you do to someone who didn't, and might one day prove it, so you salt the ground she'd have to walk back across. She left the papers under the light and stepped back from them, from him, from the box and the book, until her shoulders met the cold steel of the shelving. "But you're going to have to decide that yourself," she said. "Because I'm done proving I didn't. I proved it 11 floors down, with the 7 that wasn't cut, and you believed the ink. And now there's a sheet with no ink, and you're already halfway up the elevator to the 12. I'm not going to stand here and earn it again." She slid down the shelving until she was sitting on the concrete floor of the archive, knees up, back against 40 years of paper, and she put her wrists across her knees, both of them, the scarred one open to the air for the first time in front of him, because she was too tired to keep it turned away. "He took the shop," she said, to the floor, to no one. "He'll take the lease on the 27th, and the old woman'll be on the street 3 days before you keep or lose everything your father left you. He's got the audio, he's got a sheet that makes my worry into a confession, and he's got you looking at me the way you looked at me at the table." She breathed. "I came back with a bucket and a code, and 4 days ago I had a plan. Right now I've got a box I can't open yet, a book I can't open yet, and a man who's deciding whether I'm a liar." She turned her scarred wrist up toward the light so he could see the thin old line. "You asked me about this once, years ago. I told you I fell." She said it without weight. "I didn't fall." She let it lie there. Not the whole story, not the reason, just the fact of the lie corrected. And she watched him look at the wrist, and then at the 2 sheets of paper, and then at nothing. Taehyun's hand came off the wheel rim. It went, slowly, not to the message and not to the printout, but to his own breast pocket, where the pressed rose with the gray ribbon lived over the place a heart is. He didn't take it out, he just laid his palm flat over it, the way you check a wound is still there. "Say it happened the way you say," he said. His voice had changed, not softened. He wasn't a man who softened, but the reasoning had turned, and it was working on his own side now, against himself, the hardest direction for a man like him to point a mind. "Say he built the message 2 years ago, then he had my number too, to send it to register the fake to." He looked at the machine clean sheet. "The second number on this, the one that received it. I want it." "Why?" "Because if he registered a phone to catch a message from a wife who didn't send it," Taehyun said, "then somewhere there's a record of who carried that phone. Same as a shell has a signatory, same as a founding charter has ink in the back." He nodded. "Once, at the Oxblood book neither of them had opened. You said don't test the message against paper because there's no ink. So we don't test the message, we test the phone that caught it." Renee lifted her head off the shelving. "You're not going up the elevator," she said. "I went up once." He turned the chair a quarter, toward her, so the koi on the left of his neck caught the torch, and then didn't. "I sat there, and let one sheet decide, and I gave a man the knife, and I've paid every night for 2 years, and I'm not done paying. You said so, and you were right." His hand was still flat on the pocket. "I'm not deciding you're a liar, I'm deciding I was made to look at a liar, and I'd rather find who did the making than believe the frame twice." He picked the message up off the box. He held it a moment, then he folded it, along her crease, and held it out to her across the distance between the chair and the floor. "Keep it," he said. "You keep the papers. My eyes are bad for secrets." An old line, hers, handed back gentle. "I'll get you the receiving number by morning, without moving a dollar he can see. There's an analog way, paper, a man in billing, who owes my father a debt he thinks nobody remembers." Renee looked at his outstretched hand and the folded sheet in it, and did not take it yet. "On the 27th, she said, "the old woman loses her shop." "On the 26th, Taehyun said, "we own the man who bought its debt. Then the shop unbuys itself." "You can't promise that." "No." His hand stayed out, steady, the sheet trembling faintly in the archive's draft. "But you came back on a corner I didn't have to look at, and I looked. I can hold 16 days. She got up off the floor. She crossed the distance, not to the elevator, not away, and she took the folded message out of his hand, her scarred wrist passing through the torchlight, and their fingers met on the paper the way they'd met on the pressed rose the night before, and neither of them pretended it was nothing. "One buzz," she said, mostly to herself, remembering Lorraine's counter. "What? If she calls, I go." She put the sheet in the zip pocket with the other 3 papers now against her ribs, where the ring hung on its chain. "Get me the number by morning, and Taehyun." She waited until his black eyes came up to hers. "The next time a piece of paper tells you what I am, you read it out loud to me first. Both of us at the table. Never you alone with it. Both of us," he said. Above them, 16 floors and a lifetime of stairs up, a man in gunmetal gray sat at a desk with a founding charter's twin already destroyed and a florist's lease already bought, and drew a line through the last name on a list of ways the wife could still win, believing, the way he had believed at the table, the way clever men believe right up until the ink they didn't cut catches the light, that he had thought of everything. He had not thought of the phone. The billing man came down the stairs at 6 in the morning with a folded slip of paper and a face that had not slept. He handed it to Taehyun and left without a word, the way men leave when they have already decided to forget they were here. Taehyun read the number twice. Then he held the slip toward Renee and read it out loud, both of them, the way she had made him promise. "The phone that received the message," he said. "Registered 9 years ago. Corporate account. 1 authorized user for pickup." "Say the name." "Park Dae-sung." Renee took the slip. She laid it flat on the closed founding document, next to the forged text, and for a moment she only looked at the 3 papers stacked together. The note, the library printout, the message that said she had known. "Not Seong-jin," she said. His hand, Dae-sung's phone. Taehyun's jaw worked once. The lawyer wrote it. The security man carried it. Renee slid the slip into the zippered pocket. 4 papers now. She had stopped counting the weight. "You wanted to accuse him," she said. "Yesterday you'd have already had him against a wall. Yesterday," he put his palm flat on his knee. "I don't accuse anymore. I audit." She almost smiled. She looked at the man in the wheelchair who had frozen her out with one word 2 years ago, and she watched him choose the slower thing. "Then audit this," she said. "The gray ribbon." She had never told him the whole of it. She told him now, standing between the shelf and the chair, because the beat had come around and there was no more reason to keep it in the drawer with everything else she had closed. "The morning of the council, before you went up," she kept her voice level, "I sent you a warning. Not the pressed rose you kept. 3 white roses, gray ribbon." His hand stopped moving. "White for safe," he said slowly. "Gray for danger to the one you love. Something is coming, and it's coming for you." She held his eyes. "I couldn't put it in writing. Every channel you had was already his, so I sent it the only way that couldn't be read by the room. 3 white gray ribbon, hand carried to your floor by the shop's runner. It never reached you. I never saw 3 white roses." "No." She let it land. "Because the runner handed them to the man who met the elevator, and that man read them better than you ever could. He knew what gray meant. He'd learned the code the same year I taught it to the shop." Taehyun's breath went out of him slow. Dae-sung intercepted it. He held it 30 seconds, then he threw it away and walked into the room and stood behind your chair while the lawyer buried me. Renee's mouth was flat. "You didn't ignore my warning, Taehyun. You never got it. He made sure the last thing I gave you died in a stairwell." For a long moment, the archive was only the hum of old paper and the 2 of them not moving. Then Taehyun did the thing she had not expected. He didn't rage. He reached into his breast pocket, took out the pressed rose with its gray ribbon, and set it on the table beside the 4 papers. "Same ribbon," he said. "Same code." He knew it 2 years ago. Taehyun turned the dried flower with 1 finger. "He's known it every day since, standing at my shoulder. Now, you know why I wouldn't say a name to a man with a bad face for secrets." She crouched to his level. "If you'd swung at Sungjin, Daesung would have warned him in an hour, and the audio would be ash by noon. But Daesung doesn't know we found the phone. He thinks the gray ribbon is dead. He thinks he's the only one who ever read it. So we don't touch him. We let him carry one more thing." Renee stood, the way he always has. The vote was in 11 days. Renee moved the plan the way she moved the ledgers, by the date the ink dried, not the date on the cover. The Winter Gala fell 3 days before the vote. Every year, the CO group threw it in the tower's atrium, and every year the floral contract went out to the same vendors, and every year Sungjin signed the invoice himself because he liked to control what the room smelled like. Renee had learned that the first spring, watching the trucks unload from her corner. "He decorates the room he's going to win in," she told Taehyun. "Let him, we just change what's in the vases." She wrote it all on paper. No servers. Lorraine's shop would fill the gala order, a shop that was, on paper, hours from repossession, which made it invisible, a dying vendor nobody watched. Malcolm would move inside as he always had, badge normal, 1 white rose in his lapel. Yoon Sol would sit in the mezzanine with her physical notebook and time the thing to the minute the auditors arrived. "And the box," Taehyun said. He put his hand on the founding document, still bound, still closed. "When? Not before. If we open it now and it leaves this room, he burns Still Harbor and denies the charter, and it's my word against his signature again." She shook her head. "The charter is the proof. The gala is the trap that makes him reach for the proof himself. On camera, in front of the 12. How do you make a man reach for his own noose?" Renee looked at the pressed rose on the table. "You show him 7 red roses and 1 white," she said, "on the one date he thought he'd buried forever. And you let him run to the only place he thinks it's safe." The shop's lease came due on the 27th. On the 26th, Taehyun kept the promise he'd made in the dark. Not with a wire, not with anything that moved money where the lawyer could see it. He sent the old billing man to the note holder with a cashier's draft drawn on a dormant family account Sungjin had never bothered to track, and the shop's debt was quietly, fully paid. The repossession that was to happen 3 days before the vote simply didn't. Lorraine's name stayed on the door. Renee walked to the shop to tell her in person. She found Lorraine at the workbench, glasses down her nose, stripping thorns. "The men aren't coming on the 27th, Renee said. Lorraine's hands went still on the stems. "Hugh did that. He did that. The husband. He's not done paying for it." Renee picked up a white rose, turned it in her fingers. "But the shop's yours, and I need it for 3 more days. The biggest order it's ever filled." Lorraine took her glasses off. She looked at the younger woman a long time, the woman she'd fed and housed and never once asked the right question of. "You were somebody," Lorraine said, "in that building, before. I was his wife." Renee said it plainly, the first time she'd said it to anyone in 2 years. "I still am. It was never dissolved. He froze me out and let a man bury me, and I sold your roses on a corner and watched the window for 2 years to learn how to come back." She set the white rose down. "I never told you, because if you knew, you'd have been in it, and it was going to eat somebody. I didn't want it to be you." Lorraine reached out and took Renee's right wrist. Her thumb found the scar the way it had before. "You told me you'd not be eaten twice." "I won't." Renee didn't pull away this time, but I have to walk back into the mouth to do it. 1 more time. 3 white roses, gray ribbon. Do you remember filling that order, 2 winters ago? A rush job, hand-carried, morning of a cold day? Lorraine's face changed. The runner brought them back, said the gentleman refused delivery. He never refused. Renee's voice was quiet. They never reached him. Now I know who took them. She squeezed the older woman's hand once. Fill me 8 stems for every table. 7 red, 1 white, 40 tables. Lorraine's eyes were wet, but her hands were already moving to the buckets. And the ribbon? Wine, Renee said, except 1 table, the head table, where the lawyer sits. She let the silence do the work. That one gets gray. The atrium filled the way rooms fill when money wears its best coat. Renee watched it from the mezzanine rail beside Yuna Sol, in a white dress with clean lines, gloves off, the ring still hidden on its chain beneath the fabric. Below, 40 tables wore 40 bouquets, 7 red, 1 white, wine ribbon on all but 1. Seong-jin arrived at 8, navy suit, cufflinks catching the light, and he moved through the room the way a man moves through a house he owns. He shook hands. He touched shoulders. He passed table after table of red and white without a flicker, because the code meant nothing to a room that couldn't read it, and he had long ago stopped fearing a language he thought he'd silenced. Then he reached the head table. Renee saw the exact second it broke him. He put his hand on the back of his chair, and he looked down at the bouquet at his place setting, 7 red, 1 white, and his eyes went to the ribbon, and the ribbon was gray. He went still the way animals go still. There, Yoon-sol breathed, pen already moving. Malcolm was 3 tables away with a white rose in his lapel. Dae-sung stood at the atrium doors in graphite, gloves on, watching the room he was paid to watch. And at the center table, in the black carbon fiber chair, Taehyun sat in a tailored black suit over the charcoal shirt, no tie, the koi tattoo bare on the left of his neck, and he was looking at nobody. He was letting the room work. Songjin picked up the gray ribbon between 2 fingers. He turned, slow, scanning the atrium. For a florist, for a face, for the woman he'd been paying 2 years to keep drowned. His gaze went to the doors, to Dae-sung, and that was the tell Renee had built the whole night to catch. The lawyer's eyes found his security man, and the security man's face, for half a second, on camera under the atrium lights, answered. He's going to move, Renee said. He can't call it in. Every channel's watched tonight. I made sure the room knew the auditors were here. He can't trust the phone, so he does the one thing he swore he'd never have to, which is, he goes to the archive himself, to make sure the charter's still buried where he thinks nobody's ever looked. Below, Seong-jin dropped the gray ribbon on the table. He said something short to a passing associate, smiled the smile of a man remembering an appointment, and walked, not fast, never fast, toward the service corridor and the elevator that went down. Dae-sung peeled off the doors and followed. Renee was already moving for the stairs. The archive elevator had a camera. Renee had reminded Taehyun of that 11 days ago in this same room. Tonight the camera was the point. She took the stairs 2 at a time and came out in the sub-level corridor as the elevator doors opened. Songjin stepped out first, and he stopped cold when he saw her standing in front of the bronze-locked archive door in a white dress. For the first time in 2 years, Kwon Songjin looked at the woman he had erased and knew her. You, he said. Me. His face did the arithmetic she'd watched him do to a whole council 2 years ago. Fast, cold, running the odds, the florist on the corner. All this time, a thin sound left him, almost a laugh. You sold roses under my window for 2 years, and I paid a fortune to a records company to keep you dead. You did. Renee didn't move from the door. Still harbor, 40 accounts of nothing, and 1 of me. You've been paying monthly for 2 years to keep the therapy tapes sharp. In case I ever came back and proved the signature was forged, you'd have my own voice, ready to drown me again. She tilted her head. I found it the third day. Behind Song Jin, Dae-sung had come out of the elevator, gloves on, watching, not yet decided. You can't prove the charter, Song Jin said. You can allege. My signature's on nothing you can hold up in that room. That's why I never touched the box. Renee's voice was almost gentle. I knew if I moved on it, you'd burn it. So I left it exactly where you filed it, and I waited for you to come make sure it was safe. She stepped aside from the door. You came, on camera, 3 days before the vote. To an archive you told the whole world had nothing of value in it. Now the room's going to ask why. Sungjin's jaw tightened. He turned to Dae-sung, and his voice dropped into the register of a man who gives orders and has them obeyed. Open it. Get the personal box. Everything in the back left corner. We burn it in the incinerator on 9. And there it was. The whole chain. Spoken aloud. In the one corridor Renee had spent 11 days making sure carried sound. Because the water wall in the lobby wasn't the only microphone she'd ever installed. She'd wired this corridor the first year she'd redesigned the ground floor, back when she rebuilt the family's security, back when a woman who folded the last light before she locked the door still thought the house was hers to protect. Dae-sung, Renee said quietly, 2 winters ago you took 3 white roses with a gray ribbon out of a runner's hands and threw them in a stairwell bin. You knew what gray meant. You've carried his orders in your gloves for 9 years. Dae-sung's face moved. He's going to burn a box tonight on his own word, Renee said. And when the vote goes wrong, and it's going to go wrong, he's going to need a man to have carried the ashes. That man is you. He's built you into every crime he's committed, the same way he built me. You're the phone that received the message. You're the hands on the stairwell bin. When this falls, it falls on the man holding the box. She held his eyes. Ask yourself who he's already decided to bury. The corridor was silent, except for water somewhere far off. Singjin turned, opened the door. Singjin looked at the lawyer. He looked at the woman. He looked at the small black lens above the archive door. Red light steady, recording. He took off his gloves. No, Dae-sung said. It went fast after that, the way these things do, once the first man steps off the wheel. The archive door opened, not by Dae-sung's key, but by the bronze one Taehyun rolled out of the elevator holding, because he had come down the moment Unsol's signal reached the mezzanine, and he had heard the last of it through the corridor Renee had wired for exactly this. He crossed to the shelf himself. He set the oxblood-bound charter on the table between them, and this time, with all 4 of them in the room and the camera running, he opened it. Renee read it out loud, both of them, the way she'd made him promise. The founding charter of the shell that had been washing the family's money for 11 years, the paper original, a digital forger, still needed to exist, and at the bottom, in real ink, pressed hard enough to dent the page, 1 signature, Gon Sung-jin. The same hand that had spent a decade learning to copy a dead man's 7 cut through the middle, the same hand that had signed Renee's name to a transfer she never made, the same hand that had written an unsigned note sending a whistleblower to her corner. You needed 1 real signature, Renee said. Somewhere. A forger can fake everything but the thing that founds it. She closed the book. You founded it yourself, in ink, and filed it where you told everyone there was nothing worth reading. Song Jin said nothing. There was nothing left in the room that would take his word over the page. The council reconvened 3 days later at the same table, 12 chairs. Renee took the one at Taehyun's right, the one she'd been thrown out of 2 years before. The auditors laid it out in the order Renee had built it. The 11-year ledger where the scheme first appeared, the payment that left and came back smaller, by a fee no real bank charges itself, the handwriting analysis proving a decade of forged entries copying the founder's hand. The physical counsel thread, printed and stapled, with the 3 marital phrases lifted verbatim from Bridgewater's recordings. The chain, from Bridgewater to Still Harbor to the single authorized signatory. The monthly payments, 2 years running, to keep the tapes. The forged foreknowledge message and the corporate phone that received it, registered to Park Dae-sung, who now sat at a smaller table with the whistleblowers and told the room, in order, what he had carried and for whom, the gray ribbon roses he'd pulled from a stairwell, the founding charter, in ink, signed by the man who'd sat in the meeting 2 years ago and read a wife's private words to 12 people as if they were evidence of theft. Malcolm spoke. Then Yoon Sol, notebook flat on the table, reading her small hand that didn't slant. Then, one by one, the 4 other whistleblowers who had never known each other's names, the man from accounts payable who'd bought a single stem on Fridays, the compliance officer with a birthday every 3 weeks, the one who'd only ever read the bucket, the one who'd left the word careful in the coins. Protected now, on the record, named as sources, not suspects. Sang-jin was removed by document and by vote in the same hour. Dae-sung fell beside him, a lesser fall, the fall of a man who took off his gloves at the end instead of the beginning, but a fall. The group that Taehyun's father had built stayed in Taehyun's hands. The vote of confidence held. And then Taehyun did the thing he'd agreed to in the archive, the 4th condition, in front of the 12, on paper. He didn't read from a screen. He read from a page in his own hand. 2 years ago, I sat in this chair, he said, and a man showed me my wife's name on a crime she didn't commit. He used our own words against her, words she said to me in a room built for us to be honest in, and I had one word. He let it sit. No, I froze her out. I let her be carried to the door. She gave me a warning that morning, 3 white roses, and I never even got to fail to read it, because the man beside me made sure it died in a stairwell. He looked up, and he looked at her. I didn't lose faith in my wife. I never had enough faith in her to lose. That was mine, not hers. He set the page down. Her name is restored. Her stake is restored. Everything the last 2 years took from her, on paper, in this room, in front of the 12 who watched it taken. He signed the page, and the record will say, I betrayed the marriage before anyone ever forged a thing. Renee sat very still in the chair that was hers again. She had come back to be believed, and she had built the whole machine so she'd never have to beg for it. She hadn't expected him to say the last part, that he'd betrayed her before Sungjin ever lifted a pen. She didn't answer it. Some things you let a room hear and carry out with them. The shop reopened in the spring. Lorraine put fresh paint on the door, and Renee's name went up beside hers, small, in gold, because a woman who'd sold roses on a corner for 2 years had earned a corner of the glass. Renee kept the corner too, not because she had to, because she'd learned to read a building from across a street, and some habits you keep because they once kept you alive. Taehyun came on a Tuesday, months out, still in the chair, still recovering, from the vote, from the years, from himself. He rolled up to the counter, and Lorraine, who knew exactly who he was now, went to the back and left the front to Renee. He didn't make a speech. He'd learned she didn't trust those. 7 red, he said, and 1 white. Renee's hands went still on the counter, the way Lorraine's had, the way the whole story had taught hands to go still when the code came home. 2 years ago that string of 8 had been the weapon that buried her. A month ago it had been the trap that pulled a lawyer down a corridor to his own signature, and now a man in a wheelchair was buying it across her own counter, in a shop that bore her name, on a date that meant nothing but a Tuesday. She built the bouquet, stripped the thorns. 7 red, 1 white. Her fingers didn't go numb anymore. She'd noticed that somewhere in the spring, that they came back and stayed. You know what it means, she said, not a question. I know what it used to mean. He watched her tie it. I'm asking what it means now. Renee reached for the ribbon spool. Not wine, not gray. She tied it plain. It means the truth was found, she said. She set the bouquet on the counter between them, the way she'd once dropped a whole armful of roses on a marble floor. It doesn't mean trust yet. That one you don't get to buy. That one gets rebuilt, stem by stem, over however long it takes. I have time. He didn't reach for the flowers. He looked at her. I'll come Tuesdays. 7 red, 1 white, until it means the other thing too. For the first time in 2 years, Renee reached under the collar of her dress and drew up the thin chain. The ring hung at the end of it, warm from her skin, the ring from a marriage that was never dissolved. She didn't hand it to him. She unclasped the chain herself, slid the ring off, and put it back on her own finger, where she chose to put it, by her own hand, in her own shop, on her own terms. Tuesdays, she said. He picked up the roses. Outside, the snow was gone. The corner where she'd stood for 2 years was just a corner now, wet with spring, nobody selling anything on it. Renee watched him roll out through the door with 7 red and 1 white in his lap, and she looked down at the ring on her hand, and she left it there. 7 red, 1 white. The truth found, the rest still to grow. She turned the sign to open. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been condemned by something that carried your name but never your hand, and watched the people closest to you look away? When your own voice couldn't reach them, would you find another language to tell the truth, the way Renee spoke through roses? And if the one who exiled you finally offered his hand back, could you put the ring on again, not to forget, but to rebuild? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about truth, loyalty, and redemption, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.